Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
A big warm welcome to everyone and a huge thank you for joining us for the Australian Book Lovers podcast. Our mission is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature that spans a whole range of genres to book lovers around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I'm Veronica Strachan, aka V.E. Patton, fantasy, memoir and picture book writer, voracious reader of many genres, and one of your co-founders and hosts, coming to you from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country.
And I am Darren Kazako, dystopian science fiction and horror author, avid reader, of course, and co-founder, I guess, and co-host of Australian Book Lovers podcast and website, coming to you today from Ghana country in a wintry and blustery South Australia, down on the mid-coast. However, I know the warm weather's coming back soon, so March comes with a punch down here. So I had the beanie the other day, but I'm going to get ready for board shorts and thongs again real soon. So, but there we go. But episode 78.
Episode 78, indeed, it is episode 78, which means there are 22 to go before we hit the big 100.
Oh, the big champagne. But
yeah.
Would you like to know, Veronica, a little bit about the number 78?
Well, I would, because I'm holding on to a little bingo thing for you. So tell me about the number.
Well, I have my card, which loses every episode, but there's always hope. But no, this 78, did you know the number apparently is associated with hard work, determination and success. 78 also means that you can always rely on your instincts when you are not sure what to do or how to proceed. So the 78 suggested that you always let your heart guide you. So I like that. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, very good indeed. And I think it ties nicely into your special guest author, but more of that later.
Yes, definitely.
What the bingo number is, and it took me a little while to work this out, I'm going to say. It just didn't hit me immediately. But according to the list that I've been using, 78 in bingo is often called as 39 more steps.
Okay.
See, it's not immediately obvious, is it now? I just thought, I know that there's a book and I've read the book, and I think I've seen the film, The 39 Steps, based in the war, where a gentleman hides, and I think it's 39 steps to get somewhere, I can't remember. But anyway, it references the film The 39 Steps, so it's 39 plus 39, which equals 78.
Well,
so
yeah,
this is just 39 more steps.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, the that concept of how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. Yeah, well, you don't want to walk up 78 flights of stairs, so how about let's do 39 and then we only have another 39 to go.
That's it. So a quirky one for 78 in bingo, but there you go.
And once again, not on my bingo card, so someone else is already, on the edge about to call bingo.
There you go. All right, what else have you got about the year?
Well, I know 1977 wasn't exactly, fireworks and controversy, but 78 is almost bringing us back there. So in 1978 in Australia, Queensland Premier Joe Piocchi-Peterson announced that he would ask churches throughout Queensland to hold a day of prayer for rain. Now, and he even suggesting a date of 15th of January. Of all the states in the country, I'm a little bit perplexed that Queensland at some point needed their premier to ask people to pray for rain, which is, I'm not going to make any jokes or anything. I just found it very intriguing. On a completely opposite note, on the 13th of February, it's said that terrorism arrived for the first time in Australia, and that was with the Sydney Hilton bombing, killing 3 people, injuring 11, which is strange because episode 77 we talked about the first aircraft hijacking bombing. So I guess maybe in the skies doesn't count. I don't know. So, but apparently 1978 was the first Australian terrorism. So on the 14th of March, now this one's got a kind of a two-parter. This one's interesting. So Stephen Matthews in 1978, aged 20, was swept from the natural bridge off Albany in Western Australia by a king wave. He was then rescued by a whale ship, the Chains 2. It's the first recorded survival of someone swept into the sea at the gap and the natural bridge.
Wow.
I'm not a cosmic... Well, I am a cosmic guy, but I'm not saying this had any sort of cosmic ramifications. But on the 21st of November of that same year, that marked the last day of commercial whaling in Australia. No sperm whales were caught that day, and the ships basically that were still whaling at that time were, the Chains 2 and Chains 4, operated by the Chains Beach Whaling Company at Albany, Western Australia. So there we go. Isn't that a little bit strange?
That
Yes. The ship saves a human, and then in turn it saves a lot of whales because it was banned. I don't know, a little bit of synchronicity there. Now, Australia's Ken Warby set the world water speed record, should I say, to 510 kilometres per hour, which is just amazing. I can't even imagine that. And that was set at Blowering Dam in New South Wales. Jessica Anderson's novel Tiralira by the River won the Miles Franklin Award. Helen Garner becomes the first woman to win the National Book Council Award for her novel Monkey Grip, and that was which was selected as Book of the Year. So that's so 78 is pretty historic for literature, in Australia, for the fact that that's the first year that a lady won the National Book Council Award. It seems like a long time coming there. I thought it came down to who wrote the best book.
Yeah.
But
she has, of course, gone on to write many words, Helen Garner, so this is good.
Now, also, when it comes to entertainment, Bluefin. So 1978 Australian family film directed by Carl Schultz was released, and that was based on the children's novel by South Australian author Colin Teale, and it is a story of a father and son about tuna fishing of southern bluefin tuna in South Australia's Port Lincoln fishing district. So as you can guess, that was a huge book and movie growing up as a kid here in SA. Now, quickly before we go, the very first major miniseries produced for Australian commercial television with a budget over $1 million, Against the Winds, first screened on Channel 7.
I love that. John English. I was already a fan.
Well, I don't even know that's right. But it was also the first major Australian TV production to be broadcast in the United States.
There you go.
So at some point there, I haven't seen what happens in 79, but in 78 we had it, and then in 2023 we just let Americans come over here and make blockbusters with our movie crew, and we don't make our own. So I don't know, conspiracy. But we do. It's coming back. I think the Australian film industry is clawing its way back out of the darkness. Absolutely. Yeah. Here's one that I think you might enjoy. In 1978, Graham Kennedy won a Logie Award for presenting Blankety Blanks.
Oh, gosh.
Now, even I remember watching that show.
Yeah.
He fell upon his blank.
Yes.
Okay, but that won't make any sense to anyone who doesn't know Blankety Blanks. I assume there's some on YouTube, so have a look. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
But I'm going to finish it off with a fantastic invention by an Australian. Look, technically it wasn't invented in 1978, but it was launched, I guess. So in 1978, the bionic ear was launched, otherwise known as the hearing aid. The bionic ear, or cochlear implant, was a small device fitted into the ear to amplify, obviously, the sound for the hard of hearing. Development began under Professor Graham Clark at the University of Melbourne in 1970, but the first patient was fitted with the device in 1978. So talk about changing the world from 1978 from Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. And went on to do so many good things. I spent about a year and a half working at the Royal Victorian Eye and Ear Hospital, and they were doing some amazing work, really changing lives. But of course, Darren, you didn't mention a fairly significant event that was in 1978.
Do tell.
Well, I turned 18, so I thought I could, do all the things that adults could do, and I graduated from high school.
Oh, wow. So now, could you drink at 18
Yes,
in 78?
yes, we could.
Oh, there you
Yes,
go.
yeah.
So someone was very drunk in 1978.
Well, not necessarily.
Not
No,
necessarily.
because I wasn't a big drinker, but I was thinking about it the other day, chatting, and we used to drink so different things, and of course your taste buds change. Whereas now I quite like a nice full-bodied glass of red wine. In the early days, we used to drink jelly beans, which was like ouzo and raspberry, and fluffy ducks, which was avocado and lemonade, and fruity lexia from cask, and dreadful things. There was a drink called I think it was a screwdriver, and I think it had a particular mixer in it. Anyway, all those sort of dreadful things. Not all at once, of course, but yes, our tastes have changed. But there you go.
Yes, tastes have changed. Remember pleasure and pain, but however, the wine cask was invented here in South Australia.
That's right.
Now,
Okay.
Now, before we go any further, I think you might have forgotten something, unless today's words still are the letter B. Are we still on the letter B?
No, we are on the letter A.
Well, guess what we didn't mention last episode?
What?
The ultimate Aussie B.
What?
Bogan.
Oh, bogan. It was there, but I thought, I'm not worrying about bogans.
Probably, okay, not worthy of discussion.
Yeah, kind of moved on. Yeah, I'm a bit selective. But A's, there are some interesting ones. So I had quite a lot to choose from. Aerial ping pong. Do you know what aerial ping pong is?
I'm taking a guess here, but having lived a little bit in New South and a lot in Queensland, I'm guessing it's their poor excuse to explain Australian rules football.
Indeed it is, absolutely. So a jocular and frequently derisive name for Australian rules football, or Aussie rules as it's popularly called, the AFL, Australian Football League, and it derives from the fact that the play in the game is characterised by frequent exchanges of long and high kicks and people jump up to mark it. And yes, used largely by people from states in which rugby league and not Aussie rules is the major football code. The rivalry is often found in evidence for the term, including early evidence from the 1940s. So there you go. Aerial ping pong.
Well, I kind of get it, but at the same time, having lived in all different states, a sport where the goal is to hug each other, and I'm calling out rugby here because I really tried, but when I tried to watch it, and it'd be 5 minutes in the game, it'd already be 26-0 and the game was over. So, but at least, no, look, both sports are epic representations of athletes here in Australia, and yes, they do say aerial ping pong, but I'm sure Brisbane or the Sydney Swans, the Sydney fans, whenever they're on top, they're all going to be cheering and very happy. Yes, definitely. As opposed to State of Origin, which is the same two teams over and over and over again. Right?
Okay, let's move on to AMBO, and of course, AMBO adds shortens the word and adds the O, which is one of Australia's favourite things to do. And an AMBO is an ambulance officer.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Oh, well, is that one of Australia's favourite things to do? Oh,
right,
shortening.
There's the Arvo and the Demo and the Gyno.
Yeah, of course, yes.
And Davo and
I was thinking riding an ambulance is the most favourite thing to do. But yes, AMBO, of course.
Yeah. So is in fact the ambulance officer. Although it's kind of a little bit out of date because we tend to call them paramedics over here in Victoria now. I'm not sure whether that's become Australia-wide, but there you go.
No, still AMBOs over here.
Still
definitely.
AMBOs there.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Now, our final A to share today is Ant's Pants.
Ooh, I remember Adam Ant's song from the early 80s, but Ant's Pants, I know the Duck's Nuts, but not the Ant's Pants.
There you go. Well, in fact, it means something extremely impressive, the best of its kind, and it is apparently an Australian variant of the original US forms bee's knees and cat's whiskers with the same meaning. There you go, first recorded in the 1930s.
Oh, interesting.
So there you go, there's some Australian idioms and odd colloquial quirks from the Australian National University School of Language and Linguistics. Very much appreciate having their material and sharing a little bit with our writers, just in case you wanted to add some colloquialisms, or for our overseas guests, explain a little bit about our slightly weird language.
it's been amazing, hasn't it?
It has.
And I've learned a lot of different terms, that's for sure. But now that we've come to the reverse end of the alphabet, have you got something planned?
I have, but you know what? Wait till next
surprise?
episode. Yeah, surprise. But yes,
okay.
It's all planned, but yeah, wait till next episode and we'll have to see what we can do. And I wonder what you're going to do when we actually, how many years are you going to get up to? Will we get up to 2023? And then what are you going to do?
Well, then we're predicting the future. It's going to be amazing fun. Absolutely.
All right, sounds like it might be time for some news.
All right, let's jump into it.
A little bit of news for writers this week, or this episode, I beg your pardon. Deadset Press, who are one of the independent publishers in Australia, have put out a call for Embrace the Silence. It's a forthcoming apocalyptic neurodivergent speculative fiction anthology. If that isn't a mouthful. So submissions are open to all authors from Australia and New Zealand who identify as neurodivergent, and we just might have a special guest popping into the Writers' Lounge later with a few more details. Watch this space. The Australian Book Review, the Elizabeth Jolly Short Story Prize, is also open at the moment. It doesn't close until the 24th of April, so if short story is your jam, or in fact you want to give it a shot, get onto the Australian Book Review website. The South Coast Writers Centre has 2 mentorships for writers from refugee or CALD backgrounds, which is culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and apply by the 14th of March. So that's one that you have to get in fairly quickly. And I think that's all the news I've got. I did want to share one other thing. And there was a post, Lisa Kenway, one of the Australian authors on Twitter and part of Ozright, she posted a blog by Nicole Mallinson, and it was a link to a website. See, that goes on and on and on. I've been reading too many thrillers, but it was a link to a website, wordmothers.com, and /resources/opportunities for older writers. And it was just fantastic because the opportunities were, aimed at older writers, older being, 50 plus in most cases. And there's also 70 plus, 60 plus and 40 plus for people. They have to be over that age to get in. So I was too young for some of them, which I was very excited about. But it kind of follows an article in The Guardian by Amelia Hill, where she talked about the literary world often being accused of an obsession with youth. So, multiple awards targeted at authors under 40 and all the emerging writers being under 35 and all this kind of thing. And she went through some interesting quick interviews with particularly women writers, in this case, the rise of older female writers. So unpublished authors in the 60s, 70s and 80s. So jump onto The Guardian /books/2023/Feb and have a look at that article by Amelia and look for the older opportunity. It's hard to say, Darren. Opportunities for older writers. So there's Bloom, there's Creative Agent Writing, there's the Crone magazine, there's Daisy Petty's House Older Women Writing Awards, debut prize. Some of these are for men as well, they're not just for women. There's Hags on Fire, I love that one. There's poetry prizes, housing trusts in the UK. Unfortunately, all of the ones here are currently UK or US based, but I'd love someone to put together all the Australian awards and prizes that are, for older writers. But yeah, it was kind of reassuring. I was very happy to see.
Of all the books I've read, I've never ever looked at the age of the author. That's never come into it. Because you pick up a book, you either look at the cover or you flip on the back, read the blurb, have a bit of a suss, and if it perks your interest, you're in.
This is absolutely true.
So
what we don't see is what we don't know. What we don't know, I guess, in this instance, is how many of those writers who got to be published were either traditionally published or supported in some way to write their book, and how many were dismissed because they were older, or like me, didn't start till they were older, or a whole range of things. But yeah, you're right. If it's a good story, it's a good story.
Yeah, that's what I love about writing. The story wins at the end. Yeah, definitely. But that fantastic news there. And
yeah, absolutely. And Lisa Kenway does have her book coming out next year, I think. But anyway, I'm sure we'll be able to snaffle her and get her on to Australian Book Lovers. So thank you, Lisa, for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
What news do you have for us?
So for this episode, number 78 news, I just thought I would spotlight a couple of books that by Australian authors that are coming out this year. Some major releases through, the big publishing houses. So the first one is called The Bookbinder of Jericho by author Pip Williams. Now that's due in April. So this will be an eagerly anticipated novel from the best-selling author of The Dictionary of Lost Words. So apparently it's going to be a companion piece to that book.
Okay.
And it's going to be set at the bindery at Oxford University Press in 1914.
There you go.
So,
I did read that book and I enjoyed it. So there you go. I might have to put this one on the list.
Yeah, definitely. Another release coming out in 2023 in potentially April is Praiseworthy by author Alexis Wright. So internationally acclaimed award-winning author Wright returns with a sweeping allegorical narrative set in a small town in northern Australia. It's a cry of outrage against oppression and disadvantage, and a fable for the end of days, and is coming out, of course, in a year when the Indigenous Voice to Parliament referendum is due to occur. So that's Praiseworthy by Alexis Wright. That's coming out through Anwen and Ullen, a great supporter of ours. Coming also in April, Homecoming by Kate Morton. So this is a new book from the international best-selling author of The Clockmaker's Daughter, which is an epic multi-generational affair about secrets, lies, motherhood, and the healing nature of truth. Now this one sounds really interesting. This title is called Every When, Australia and the Language of Deep History, edited by Anne McGrath, Laura Raidmaker and Jacqueline Troy. And this comes from New South Books. Now it does say February, so it should be out now. So it's described as time as linear and resolutely chronological is a very white Eurocentric concept. Every When asks how knowledge systems of Aboriginal people can broaden our understanding of the past and of history. Indigenous ways of knowing, narrating and reenacting the past and the present blur the distinctions of time, making all history now. So that sounds really cool. Every When, Australia and the Language of Deep History.
I'm reading at the moment Sand Talk by Tyson Yunkaporta, and again it's how Indigenous thinking can change the world, and it's just fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating.
If there's any way that we can come from this technological society but also bridge that gap to how we got here and build a real good sort of universal global knowledge, I think that'd be a beautiful thing, because there's so much that comes to leading up to the the ability to wake up, turn on a laptop and do Twitter, from spiritual and technological and our place in the universe. So I agree. Speaking of our place in the universe, another book coming out, or may already be out because it was scheduled for February, through Ultimo Press, is called The God of No Good by Sita Walker. So this is an intergenerational memoir that also traverses locations from Iran to India, Sri Lanka to the Czech Republic, Adelaide, yay, to the Torres Strait. This book canvases the loss of religion in marriage and the gaining of new love and new experiences. So it sounds like a bit of a sweeping epic there. And from Penguin Random House is Unbounded by Maria Thatil. So Maria Thatil was crowned Miss Universe Australia in 2020 and was placed in the top 10 of the international competition in 2021. She was only the third woman of colour to represent Australia in the pageant's 69-year history. Thatil also happens to be a queer child of South Asian immigrants. So this book tells her stories of belonging and identity, and her struggles with racism, sexism, financial hardship, homophobia and mental health. So, there's a lot in those pages, I suspect, and that is Unbounded by Maria Thatil by Penguin Random House. So, yeah, there we go. That's my news thing. I know we've covered a bit of the fringe, but I thought, we've talked about how there's so many events coming up and possibly lots of competitions and so much to go see. But also there's a whole bunch of great books coming out by fantastic... we're still waiting on the incoming for the opals, but by amazing Australian authors. And that's just a little snapshot. And so there we go. A little bit of news for 78. We've got a really cool interview with Ben Hobson coming up, which is... you're just going to love it. So you're going to be... whatever you're doing, you'll sit down or stop what you're doing, because it is filled with so much information. Great discussion. He is an amazing guest. However, now that news is over, we're about to jump into an interview, but, well, the wind's a bit chilly. The sun doesn't know whether it's rising or setting. How about we step into a cafe, warm our feet, and have a coffee and do a little bit of a reader's cafe.
Just before you jump in to tell us about all the books, I wanted to mention that one of our favourite authors, Petronella McGovern, who, I can't remember which episode she was in, but a few episodes ago, and I had listened to her book, The Liars, which was her new release, and the one that we did talk about her other books, which the first was 6 Minutes, and the second is The Good Teacher. Well, I'm going to say that these books need to have a warning on their front covers or somewhere at the beginning. And why may you ask this is, yes, there's some tricky topics, but they are so page-turningly good that you will not get any work done. And I say this because a friend of mine, I told her to read The Liars, and then she said to me, like, the next day, why did you make me do that? Because I just had to keep reading it, and I was supposed to get a report done. And so she read The Liars just like that. And the same thing happened to me when I read 6 Minutes. So I'm a bit scared to open The Good Teacher because I haven't got time to spend a whole day, night, morning, evening on a book when I've got a bit of work and it's a work week. So
well, you will as soon as you open the pages.
Oh, it'd be terrible.
Everything else will fall away.
Yeah, so, compelling, page-turning, be careful. Do not start this book late at night is perhaps what the warning is to say. So congratulations, Petronella. You have absolutely got me suckered into reading your other books, and I'm really glad that I did.
I was going to say that you can't sort of praise a book more than that.
No.
Warning tag. You will not be able to drop from your hands from the minute you open page.
Please ensure you have water. and an emergency word to call out in extremis should you need to go somewhere.
Generators for light bulbs should electricity run out. Yeah.
Yes. All right. So tell us what came onto the website since the last episode, Darren.
Absolutely. So while I sip a good strong coffee so I can, weather this, cold weather until the warm weather comes in my little virtual cafe, there's a couple of great titles I want to spotlight on that have been, generously submitted to the Australian Book Lovers website. First one is a fantasy novel, and the novel is called Shadows of Silverheim by author Toula Gordillo. And basically, Shadows of Silverheim is described as follows. Shadows of Silverheim is a teaching tool as well as a damn good story for all ages. It is written by Dr. Toula Gordillo as part of a doctorate in creative arts at the University of the Sunshine Coast. Its purpose was originally to help youth to become more resilient by reframing and illuminating positive mental health messages for young adult readers. It has, however, been well received by youth and older adults alike. The novel covers contemporary themes of living in poverty, parent-child conflict, issues of grief and loss, as well as alcohol abuse and substance misuse. The themes are initially explored in the real world of Aurora, located somewhere west of Australia's Great Dividing Range. In a true hero's journey story, the characters then enter a mythical universe with magical elements, a place called Silverheim, hence the title. Here, Jack, age 16, and his quirky sister Emily, age 14, are separated by a huge hedge of silver. As they journey through Silverheim, they converse with a riddle-talking tree. Jack falls in love with a water nymph called Ari and talks with fairies. Emily frees herself from her shadow, and Mr. Bogle becomes trapped in a cave where she learns to confront her deepest fears. This novel is not only entertaining, but also informative. It is presently used with youth in schools as well as part of story image therapy, also known as SIT, for individuals of all ages in medical centres and other institutions in Australia, New Zealand and India. So, whoa, that is one hell of a package, and that is Shadows
Indeed.
of Silverheim by Dr. Toula L. Gordillo, and you can find that under our fantasy genre on the Australian Book Lovers website. But yes, I don't even know how to begin to describe that sort of description. There's a
That's all
little
right.
bit of
We'll be
everything
talking
there.
to Toula in a few episodes. So
There we go.
We'll hear all about it.
We can unwrap that mystery and magic. Fantastic. Now we have a science fiction book by Pauline Yates, and that's called Memories Don't Lie. So Memories Don't Lie is described as orphaned niece of Lieutenant John Wilson. Sarah Wilson is determined to escape his restrictive upbringing and find her place in the world. Her journey takes a deadly turn when she uncovers secrets about her past, hidden deep in her mother's memories, that threaten everything Sarah wants. They could cost her everything she holds dear, and her life. With her latest science fiction action adventure book, Memories Don't Lie, Australian author Pauline Yates delivers an engaging story of a young woman's resilience and struggle as an orphan in search of answers in a genetically enhanced world. Yeah, very few layers there to unwrap.
Indeed, yes. And I've
Memories Don't
been
Lie.
waiting for this one to come out. So that's on the TBR list.
Well, you better tell your clients the project dates may be pushed back.
Oh, I can't.
Now we have a romance, switching gears here, by an author who's already put a couple of books up. It's fantastic, Cheryl Burman, and the title is called Walking in the Rain. So Walking in the Rain is described as follows. Sometimes destiny can't be left to chance. 3 years ago in a hospital in the snowy mountains, Alf Hall stood by while the woman he loved reunited with her wayward husband. These days, Rain and Teddy are his best friends. Their children call him Uncle Alf. Now Alf stands by as his days slip into loveless tedium. June Lovell, a nurse, witnessed the anguish in Alf's eyes. A spark glowed between them, but life moved on. Pushed by a near tragedy into searching for a new start, Alf returns to the mountains. He tells himself finding June is not the reason he's chosen this particular place to be, which is probably for the best, because it seems that June has found the man of her dreams. Can the stars be made to align this time, or will life move on again? A little complicated love situation there, and that is Walking in the Rain by romance author Cheryl Burman under our romance genre.
Very good.
Speaking of romance, we have a prolific romance writer from Queensland, Faye Hall. So Faye is, it seems like Faye is just, she is just a romance machine in the sense of the literary machine. Her latest listing on the Australian Book Lovers podcast is Lover's Ransom. So Phoebe Toulouse ran away from her family, from her fiancé, and from her life. Upon arriving in the dusty outback town of Milchester, Queensland, Australia, Phoebe is certain she is finally safe from the bastard who wants to rob her of everything she has, including her life. Being swept up in the strong arms of a stranger, she finds herself tempted with pleasures she couldn't refuse and must face the uncertainty surrounding what was to become of her. This wasn't a job Raymond McAllister wanted to do, but he had no choice. If he didn't take Phoebe back east to Inkerman, he'd be risking his sister's life. Given that she was Gordon Marriott's half-sister, he doubted it would be easy to find her, but he would not allow himself to feel guilt for any member of that heartless, corrupt family. When he meets Phoebe running for her life on the streets of Milchester, he couldn't believe this beauty was any family of Gordon's. Will she let him play at being a knight in shining armour though, or has he left it too late? So, there's some really intriguing outback country romance twisted, lots of threads there, and all of the titles are like, I'm almost being drawn to the romance thanks to Faye Hall, but that is called Lover's Romance, found under our romance section. A couple of spotlights of some of the latest listings on the Australian Book Lovers website, and that is part of the cafe. So I'm going to sip the rest of my coffee and maybe head back into the best part of the podcast, one of the best parts, and that is the interview. So let's
bring it on.
Yeah, step out. Let's go.
Darren, tell us who you are chatting with.
I had the absolute pleasure of chatting with a gentleman by the name of Ben Hobson, and now that I'm pepped up with a little bit of coffee from the the cafe, I can tell you that sit back and enjoy the show, because Ben is, look, he gives such a massive insight, not only into the writing process, not only into the stories that he's already put down and some of the themes that he wanted to explore, some of the themes he may not have even knew he wanted to explore, but also such a passionate and energetic guest who talks about research, a whole bunch of stuff. So I was super lucky. As for his work, you'll learn a little bit more as we dive into it. So I'm not going to say without further ado. What I will say is, ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the interview that I was so lucky enough to have with none other than Ben Hobson. Ladies and gentlemen, my next host is the author of novella If the Saddle Breaks My Spine, which was published in 2014, about, of all things, a 13-year-old Sam Keogh who eventually finds himself trying to make sense of a terrible reality of whaling and the cruelty and alienation of a new world, with the world of men, so which I hope to be talking a little bit about in a second. He is also the author of debut novel Snake Island, published in 2019, followed by his latest book, which is called The Death of John Lacey, which of course is the reason we've got him on the show to talk about. So I'm very excited. My guest is none other than Mr. Ben Hobson, who is so kind enough to join us after what sounds like quite a bit of a road trip. But Ben, thanks for joining the Australian Book Lovers podcast.
Oh man, I wouldn't miss it. I was talking to Darren before we went on a little bit of a weekend holiday with the kids up to Bundaberg, and we went to see the little turtles, loggerhead turtles, hatching, which was a real privilege. But I went to bed very late and then drove back all day today. But this is why I drove back today, Darren.
Thank you, man. That's much appreciated. I feel special now. Now you put me on the hot coals, because I'm going to have to make sure this is the best interview you've ever had.
Well, that's what I expect. That's what I'm hoping for.
All right,
so
I'm going to do my best, yeah. but of course, one of the first questions is, how spectacular was the turtle hatching, and how many people are allowed to be there at any one point to watch it?
Yeah, it was really interesting. It's this it's called I can't say the name, Monrepo or something like that. Monrepo, that's it. And it was really cool. We had a group of about, I would say, 25 people. But there's this beautiful turtle center, and we saw these documentaries. They do all these conservation things. We actually learned the history of the place as well, which was really cool. And then they take you out onto the beach, and they have a guide. You're not allowed to have any sort of light, because the turtles sort of get confused if you have a lot of light pollution. So you're walking in pitch black just by the moon. And then we went up to this little place and we saw the little turtles emerge out of this little hole. And they kind of spill out of it. Have you seen Aliens?
Of course.
Yeah, you know that scene where they look up into the vent and they see the aliens kind of swarming through the vent?
Yep.
That's kind of what it's like, the little turtles, because once one goes, it's just like this swarm of them come out and they're flipping and flopping all over the place. But it was really cool. And the kids especially loved it. We got back at like midnight, but if you're ever up near Bundaberg, totally recommend it.
Well, I know I've been with a few different sea creatures in different waters, but between here and sort of Cairns and Gold Coast and all those areas and northern New South Wales. Dolphins are fantastic, of course. Who doesn't love swimming with dolphins or surfing with dolphins? Sharks, I've seen a few. But as far as, the most tranquil thing I've been in the water with, it's sea turtles. They're amazing. Like, you dive under and you follow them and they sort of look behind and go, hey, bud. And they just keep on. Yeah, they're amazing creatures. So definitely good for the soul.
One of the documentaries described them as feeling ancient, and they do. They just feel
wise.
Yeah. That's a great word. Wise and graceful. And it was a real privilege. It was a bit of a shame they said that only on average, 1 out of every 1,000 loggerhead hatchlings actually survive till full adulthood, just because of, well, so many different things that are problematic for the turtles. But but that means in 30 years, one of those turtles we saw go out today could come back and lay eggs on that same beach, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think we were just talking, Veronica and I, just a couple of episodes ago about Mother Nature and as nature as a character. And yes, it can be super cruel sometimes, as beautiful as it can be other times. But yes, but nonetheless, here you are, Ben, to talk about your brand new book. But obviously, we've got a lot to talk about, and I'm going to try and race through it for you. But I would love
no need to race. I'm here, man. Let's go.
You're here. Let's go.
Well, 4-hour podcast. Let's do it.
All right. But what I'd love to do, would you be able to take a moment just to let our listeners know a little bit about yourself, what drives you, and I guess how you managed to find what is the best road of all, and that is the one that leads to writing.
Oh, geez, those are big questions. Great questions. A little bit about me, like the question, why do I write? I don't know. I mean, it started up very innocently, I think. I was in a band in Melbourne.
Oh, that was a ska band, wasn't it?
Pardon?
Was it a ska punk?
Yeah, ska punk hardcore band called Sounds Like Chicken. I'll rewind a little further back. When I was in high school, I was always the nerdy Nintendo kid who got rocks thrown at him. Like, I was really bullied, and I was made to feel very insecure about who I am, and I didn't have a lot of confidence. When I didn't actually graduate high school for a variety of reasons, but after high school, because my brother picked up a guitar, I thought, well, that looks like he's really enjoying himself. I might as well pick up a bass guitar. And when I picked up that bass, I guess it's the first thing that I really felt where I was creative and I guess doing something worthwhile with my time, I guess, like something quite fulfilling about being creative in that way, and disciplined and feeling proud of myself, feeling happy with who I was. And then when I eventually joined the band and we started to play shows in different cities and I had this family with me, my confidence grew and grew and grew, and I started to become, I guess, happy in who I am and happy to interact with people, I was always fairly insecure about my way of moving through the world, I guess. And then because I met this beautiful girl up in Queensland at a wedding, I thought, well, I'm going to abandon all of my my band mates and my family down in Melbourne and move up to Queensland to be with her.
That is love at first sight.
It was actually.
Love.
Yeah. And we're still married. I'm very pleased that I did move up here. But when I moved up here, I sort of left behind that family that I had, those bandmates who I'm still very close with. And when I came up here, I was studying music at uni, and I had some great people who I knew at university as well through music, but I just felt like I wanted to do something different. It was actually Lena who asked me, or suggested to me, like, you always read books. You devour so many different books. Have you ever thought about doing some creative writing? And I said, no, I don't know. Like, it had never struck me as something that a person could do as a hobby. It never struck me. I just thought authors were of a different class or something. I had no idea what I was really thinking, but okay, yeah, mate, I've got a keyboard. I have a laptop. I do assignments at university. I could give it a go. So yeah, I really started out doing writing through just wanting that creative outlet and wanting, again, that feeling of, I guess, that feeling of connection that I think art and creativity can bring. And because I had read so many different novelists who I've just never been as struck as I have been when I've read a really good novel. And I get the same feeling when I listen to some great music. I definitely get the same feeling when I watch a great film or a TV show. But I think there's something really unique about reading a novel where it's so intimate and it describes so much of yourself and the world that you operate in. And it suggests things that maybe you haven't thought of. It can be quite confronting. It can be disturbing. It can be joyous. I don't know. And I guess now that I continue to do it, that's the main thing that I aim for. I really want to be giving other people that same feeling that my favorite novelists give me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful description. Also really liked that you mentioned, that wanting, that yearning, that need to reinvigorate the relationship you had with art. And I think that's true. I think it is a relationship you have with art, in the sense of, I guess you could replace the word art with perhaps muse. And then you can be alone, or not lonely, but you can be alone. And if you want to connect, want to dance with that muse, and you want to get that feedback and create art, then that is a friend. I don't know how you could describe the muse. I think everyone would describe his or her muse completely different, but it is definitely a relationship, isn't it?
Well, when you say muse, what do you mean? Like the creativity as a personified or something like that?
I think when you sit down to write a musical piece, or you sit down to write some literature, or whatever you're going to do to be creative, I think there's a part of you that then is unlocking, you stepping into that pool of creativity, that muse, that source, and I really feel there's a connection where something that lets you illuminate areas of yourself sometimes that you wouldn't have illuminated without stepping into that pool of creativity.
Yeah, I don't know whether I would use that language, but I certainly feel that when I get to a place, music especially, but when I get to a place with writing where I'm not consciously making choices, like I'm not thinking this will be a great idea for this scene, or I'm not thinking through. Like my main objective when I'm writing is to get to the place of flow. And I think that's where you can really clue into a lot of your subconscious, and the way you really feel about things is when you are going at such, I always try to write quickly so I can't overthink what I'm doing. Because when I'm trying to think it through, I know in my mind I'll try to pretty it up, or I'll try to make it pleasing to other people, or I'll try to maybe put on some fancy airs and use fancy vocabulary that maybe I wouldn't have used normally. But when I'm writing quickly and can really key into that subconscious, I think that's where some really special things can happen. I'm not saying that I'm perfect at that by any stretch, but I know for an example, with To Become a Whale, it took other people reading that book for me to understand what I was actually saying.
That's really interesting.
That's happened a few times. It happened with Snake Island. I'm interested to see if that'll happen with The Death of John Lacey, because apparently I'm very interested in fatherhood. I'm very interested in masculinity. I'm very interested in living a fulfilling life and meaning and things like that. And I sort of know I'm interested in that stuff, but I didn't realize until I produced these things and someone else had sort of talked about my stuff back to me, which is pretty cool. I really love that part of the connection with readers.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you've kind of majestically led up to one of the questions and topics of conversation I wanted to bring up, because you mentioned To Become a Whale. So, and I mean, obviously, I mentioned before you penned the novella If the Saddle Breaks My Spine, and also Snake Island, and of course the latest book, The Death of John Lacey. And my initial impression, looking at the descriptions of all those books, including the novella, is that each of the work seems to cover completely different subject matters. I mean, you've got whaling, and then you've got crime, and then you've got gold rush, and the line between right and wrong, good and evil, and morality. But I could be wrong there too. So my question is, would that be an accurate observation that they are completely different subjects, or, alluding to what you just mentioned then, are there themes embedded within the books that help to maintain a narrative thread across them all? And you think maybe the flow has brought that through, and because you're in the forest you can't see the trees, or do you think it's something you've come to see now through the feedback with other readers, and do you think that's a journey you're taking?
Yeah, it's a good question. They're definitely different subjects. I would even say I think there's similarities in their tones, but I think they're fairly different genre pieces as well. But I think the main thing that I'm interested in is presenting a type of conflicting ethical dilemma, or conflicting kind of morality, and what people can do in the face of those things. I think my favorite type of story is one where I don't know the right course, like I don't know the right way through, because I feel like that's quite confronting. Like not everything in my experience in life, is really as black and white as here's a good guy, here's a bad guy. I really find it interesting, the pull between we don't know. And I just think it's really interesting to show that, and like it's okay to be complex and conflicting in that way, and what would you do in those situations. But yeah, To Become a Whale is really about, bringing up what To Become a Whale to me is how to be a father. Okay. Which, I was a new dad when I wrote that book, and it's something that I'm going to be learning the rest of my life, I'm fairly certain. But my deepest desire is to be like, I don't want to be second place as dad in the world. Like, I want to be number one dad. I want to earn that mug that you get on Father's Day, but I don't know if I am. And that lack of a sure thing, you know what I mean? And like, you make mistakes, how do you live with those things? Snake Island is similar, there's a lot of stuff in there to do with Vernon has a son who's made some terrible decisions and has wound up in jail. And how does he actually father a son who has done some really immoral things? Like, what's the best thing to do? Do you pat him on the back and say, I'm here for you, good job, and you coddle him a little bit? Or do you toughen him up? And it's that juxtaposition that's really interesting to me. Lacey's a little different, I think. Lacey's a little different. It's got there's something profoundly evil in Lacey, and hopefully something profoundly good.
Profoundly evil.
Yeah, well, I wrote John Lacey himself is the most evil character I've ever written, and it's because what we were talking about, he does not have a moral qualm. He does not see, should I do this? And this is the right thing to do, so I should try to do that. He doesn't think that way. He just looks at the world and thinks, what can I take? And then he does it. And he has and he was an absolute breeze to write because of that, because he just was so certain on everything he decided, but he's rotten, he's horrible. And then hopefully there's other characters that showcase the kind of Julian morality that I love. But John Lacey himself is, he's very different creation, I think.
It's interesting because you talked about To Become a Whale, and that kind of was set against the backdrop of, whaling, and I guess the horrific elements of that, which I'd be curious to know what inspired that. But then obviously with Snake Island, there's that violent sort of background character of prison and, violence that represents the sort of antagonist. And then of course talking about John Lacey, where John Lacey is personified of the nastiness. It's almost like there's always that simmering the evil in each of the stories, but each time not necessarily evil by nature, but perhaps like you said, there's no good or bad. What inspired you to use whaling to set against this 13-year-old's experience of being around men? Because it's quite an interesting contrast. Yeah,
it really. Thank you for saying that too. By the way, it was well put. I thought what you just said about. I think I am interested in like evil on purpose, evil or accidental evil. I am interested in that. But To Become a Whale. How did that start? It was really to do with. I like to start from a place where I want to see something happen. And when I'm writing, it's like I'm watching a scene unfold. If I can get to that place, and you do have to edit and put your craft on there a bit later, but if I can just watch how a scene plays out. And so the first idea I had for To Become a Whale was to have the opening be of a young boy whose mother has just passed away. And he was very reliant on her because she really got him, like she really understood who he was. And so he sort of gets left with his dad. And that was the original design. And I wrote a few chapters on that of just this boy getting to know his dad, because the dad took him into the bush and decided he was just going to build a new home for them both without the dad explaining what he's doing or why he's doing it. And so I just started out with that, and I just thought it was really vibrant and interesting, this relationship. But then I kind of wanted to make a little bit of extra conflict, and so I thought I need the dad to have a job where he is absent for a fair majority of the year, so the kid wouldn't really know him, And so I mean, it sounds silly, but I just looked around for interesting professions, things that would, make a man leave his family for a while. And as I was looking through the research in Queensland, I stumbled onto Tangalooma whaling station, and all the facts and statistics of how that place ran. It was the biggest whaling station in the Northern Hemisphere. It ran all the way up until 1962. It was just really, really interesting to me. And I thought, man, because when I grew up, I was very sensitive about animals, especially. Like I think
I still am.
Pardon?
I think I still am.
Yeah, me too. Like I felt really a lot of empathy for animals. I was a very sensitive kid, which again, why I was bullied a fair bit, which I've later learned is actually a strength of mine. But anyway, so I felt this connection with animals, and I thought, what would it be like for a kid who is really sensitive about harm to animals to go to a whaling station and have a dad like try to pound that out of him a little bit? I just thought, man, that's so interesting. And then researching about the world, it was just such an interesting place. And I especially love specific language to do with skills and tasks. So to learn about, how they would take the eardrum out of the whale, and they would be able to tell how old the whale was by the number of rings in the eardrum and all those things. I know that's grisly, but I found that stuff very, very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely interesting. Yeah, and that brings up a really interesting dilemma in itself, doesn't it? Which I don't know if it's one you explore in the book or not, but, is it something that you have to drum into a 13-year-old who maybe isn't all too pleased with the idea of doing that sort of thing?
Well, see, that's the question, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
isn't it, Darren?
Right.
Because, his dad, to me, was just trying to do the best he could with what he had, and he knew life was hard, and this kid cannot be as sensitive as this. I need to toughen him up. And as much as I feel for Sam, I kind of also feel for his father, and I again, this is what I'm trying to present is is there a right or wrong way? Like the dad did not understand the son, but the son didn't understand the dad either. And I don't know, I found that conflict really interesting. And so I really tried to layer in a lot of his father being really sometimes kind. He's layered. He's not just mustache twirling. He sticks up for his son sometimes. Like he actually wants the best for him, but he just can't communicate it very well, which, again, goes back to talking about how hard it can be as men to sometimes talk about our feelings, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, to keep picking at these things, because they're really interesting. And you've just been so gracious as to reveal a lot about to become a whale and the journey that 13-year-old Sam takes as well, should I say, as his father. And then in Snake Island, obviously, Snake Island describes a father's, I guess, need to step into a setting of crime and violence to perhaps help a son that he's all but disowned. And of course, and then you've got the death of John Lacey now, which is, you've stepped back in a little bit in time and you've got brothers on the run from the law, and they're in a town where the lines between right and wrong might be blurred, I'm guessing, to say the least. And in a tale that I might say you've described as a meditation on the true meaning of mercy and justice. So to keep things nice and light, Ben, I wanted to know, how would you currently define mercy and justice, and has your view changed since writing the books? And if so, what was that process of change like?
Geez, that's a good question. What's my viewpoint on mercy and justice?
Well, if you had to define it in 2 sentences, or I know that's not an easy one to just come with on the fly.
No. But that's why I appreciate that question. I mean, it's a really good question.
Would you say that while you're trying to work out how to define it today, would you say it's changed? It has changed from writing those books, or do you think it's been pretty concrete in your mind, and that's something that you wanted to apply to the stories as you wrote each book?
I think that there's a lot of injustice, and I think every person lives with a deal of injustice in their lives and things that have been unfair toward them, I guess. Yeah, there's a type of justice, I think, that sort of supersedes everything else. but yeah, I don't know how to answer that if I'm being real, man. Like it's
Yeah, no, please.
such a good question. And then that idea of mercy as well, and when to give it. That's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing, I think, as a father, as a person operating in this world. Like you want to sort of teach people to, you have to hold people to account. Like you can't just forgive. Well, you can forgive everything, but you can't just let everything go without them learning a lesson. You know what I mean? Like justice to me is about trying to equip a person to not keep on doing things that harm other people. But it's just who's applying the justice and who's the one receiving it. And if they're receiving it, especially when it's like a type of punishment, you know what I mean? Is it really being received? Is it really a lesson? Are we really actually helping? To me, I don't know. I don't think mercy and justice, I don't think necessarily are separate. I think there's a type of mercy with being a little severe sometimes, but geez, I don't know whether man is able to actually do a good job of administering it. You know what I mean? Like it always seems like a corrupted kind of place where people try to bring justice to something else. Because we're humans and we stuff it up all the time.
I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah,
it's so difficult to get right. Mercy though is such a beautiful thing, man. Like, especially when it's given to someone who's, I'm using inverted commas here, but someone who doesn't deserve mercy. There's a type of softness, I think, that we really lack in a lot of ways. And I know that thinking about myself, like I'm always working on being more patient and more merciful and more full of grace if I can be. But that's a very long work in progress, and, maybe writing these books, my way of sort of puzzling these things out. I don't ever write something and try to view it as like an answer. Like I'm not especially, on any of the stuff I've ever done, it's not like I'm sitting here saying like I've got all the answers. I don't think I do. I think that I am just a person trying to think about things. And if hopefully my books are that it's my thoughts on a subject out on the page, as messy and as complex and confusing as I sometimes find things, Yeah,
and I think, the reading journey, that, all the books that each of us read and the paths it takes us, one way or the other, I think it helps. It is breadcrumbs in a world that I don't think there is justice anywhere. Because if justice exists, I'd ask someone to point me out on the map where it is. Justice is an ideal. This is my personal feeling anyway. I think justice is an ideal, absolutely. And by having that ideal and pretending we share that ideal, I guess we can... It's like an invisible super glue holding together the society. Yeah. But the problem with super glue is it's see-through. And I think if you look through it, you can see that the people talking about justice, of course, are the ones furthest from anything we'd call justice or just. And then you got the paradox of mercy, where I think mercy, like you said, is such a beautiful thing. And if used correctly, it can supersede and maybe be that finishing, that full stop on violence, rather than having perpetual back and forth. But of course, mercy, I don't want to say that it's all across today, but I can't help but feel that mercy is looked upon as a weakness.
Absolutely right.
And that's there is the catch-22.
It's absolutely right. And the thing is with mercy is just as powerful. And I think it's even harder sometimes to administer than justice.
Yes, absolutely.
Like justice, again, in inverted commas. Like I don't talk about this a lot because I just don't think, I very much try not to, proselytize and bring out my sense of morality onto other people. But I do have a faith, I do believe in God. And I guess on that's my only answer to that is that, I think we human beings muck it up and confuse it all the time, but there's only justice will be found maybe when we're passed away. I don't think it's available down here in a neat package, at least, and I think we can always strive to do our best to be merciful and to be just as often as we can in our lives, but we simply can't control everyone else's choices, I guess. So messy, which is what I like. I think life is messy, and I think art should reflect that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you said it beautifully then. And yeah, look, I agree. I don't think justice is something we're going to come across, but by being able to read these tales, being able to sit down and think about these things, and they are messy things, and they don't come with solutions. But I would much rather be on the pathway looking for, to slowly build my wisdom than looking for justice. Because I think, with wisdom and knowledge, it will give me the ability to do the best I can in an unjust world. Mm-hmm. Rather than trying to pretend it's a just world. It's not a just world. So how about I just want to find the tools.
Best I can.
Hope to stumble upon some mercy down these dark paths. But if, however long I make it through this upside down place, I can do it the best way I can.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree. I'd much rather feel uncomfortable. You know what I mean? I'd much rather read art and watch films and have conversations with people that make me feel uncomfortable with my place in the world, because I think that's where growth happens. And that's my favorite type of book to read, and it's certainly my favorite type of book to write. I think that if we can get to that place of where we're just like, oh, this is like, I don't like sitting in this. I don't think the way I would act in this situation would be right. Like, I've really got to rethink myself a little bit. I think that's a really positive place to be. I think it's a humble place to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it takes a long time to try and get to a point where you can learn to judge yourself on your own actions rather than what you intend to do or what you would do. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, man.
I'm not saying I'm anywhere near that, but it's definitely, those little steps to try and get to that point.
Oh, it's such a journey. Like, I feel like as I've grown older, I've become less anxious, but I used to have sleepless nights just worrying endlessly about, like, I've said something wrong to someone and what will they think of me? And I used to just toss and turn for weeks about, what my words might have said to that person. Like, it's been a real maturation. Hopefully, I don't think I'm there yet. Let me be real. But I think I'm better able to put things in their place a little bit more and be less highly strung, I guess, and a little bit more relaxed. And I just do my best every day. And I kind of try to be, you know what, Darren? Try to have a bit of mercy on myself sometimes as well.
There we go. Yes. I think that belongs on a shirt. Have a little mercy for yourself sometimes too.
That's a good idea.
Now, well, you're definitely not going backwards. You're definitely moving forward in that endeavour, because obviously one of the big reasons I've got the honour of chatting with you today is because of the death of John Lacey in the book. So I'll bring things a little bit lighter. When did the idea start for that one? How did it come about?
Yeah, it was 2019, and I had Snake Island had come out, so that came out in August, and it was sort of in the later half of 2019. And I originally wrote it just as an experiment. I'd watched the film, which is, I would say, I'm going to say it on record, I think my favorite movie ever.
Okay, this is on record. Now, you're saying ever, or just for today, this is your favorite movie?
No, ever.
Oh,
yeah, I know. And if people know me, like, I love film, and like, I used to want to be a filmmaker when I was really young, but I love film. But I think my favorite movie is There Will Be Blood.
Oh, wow. Look, that's not a bad choice at all.
Yeah, I feel pretty safe with that choice, but that's the one that spoke the most to me. But I found myself watching it and just falling in love with Daniel Plainview, just because of what a complex, fully realized, horrible, kind of charismatic. He did so much, Daniel Day-Lewis did so much with that character, but Paul Thomas Anderson with writing it as well. I just found him to be really, really engaging and really, really captivating.
Oh, he's riveting, yeah.
Riveting, yeah. And so I thought, well, I want to write a book with someone like that. And so I needed a setting where there would be, just like Daniel Plainview had this lust for oil and the power it would lend him. So I had, again, doing the thing I do, kind of looked for places in Australia that were like that. And I stumbled on the goldfields in Ballarat. There's a place that would be really interesting to set a character in that place. But I wrote the first section in a rush, and it was really, really, I wrote it in the exact way I would want to read it.
Oh, okay.
And I think, and I'll get to this in a second, but I think I was starting to fall into the trap of because when you've got published work out in the world, you do start to really fear, well, not fear, but you read reviews and people talk about your work. And I was reading a lot of reviews of Snake Island that said this book is really dark and it's really mean and I was just starting to feel like I want to write something that people will like, which
I would have been happy with that review. I like dark stuff, but there you go.
That's the thing, and that's where I've come back around, Darren. But in the midst of it, you don't have a Darren on your shoulder to tell you that. And so I was getting into this thing. So I wrote this section and I felt it. I was just like, this is exactly what I wanted to write. It was stripped. It was mean. It was really, really sparse. And I wrote it in the exact way I wanted to write it. But when I got to the end of it, I realized how little I knew about the time. Like I realized I was not really aware very well of the role of the Wadawurrung people around the gold rush, and First Nations people especially. And as I was writing, I was growing more and more aware of just what an oversight that was, and how I think originally I was trying to sort of write around it, which is horrible to think, but I was just really consumed with getting that aspect, especially of the book, wrong and doing harm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which I think is a good caution. I think that I was right to feel that. And that's why I actually stopped. I stopped writing it and I was just like, there's too much going on here. And I don't think I'm equipped yet to actually do a good job with this. And then 2020 hit and I was in the midst of this. I was also preparing to go to Nepal on a trip to hike up to Everest Base Camp. And so I was doing that prep. So that sort of started to consume me a little bit. And so I put Lacey away. And then it came time in January for me to fly to Nepal, or it was early February actually. And while I was there, when you're climbing up to Everest Base Camp, it's the coldest I've ever been. It's frigid. I was looking for a good word. It's just insanely cold. And you can't even have a pen. You've obviously got no electricity all the way up there. You're sitting around, huddled around, a fire that's burning yak poo because they don't have wood at certain altitudes. So you're huddled around this dried yak poo with oil fire. And you just have to sit in these little tea houses at the end of each day after this arduous journey.
And it's I'm just not sure if you're selling it for me.
You know what though? This would be selling it for certain people.
100%. Yeah. No, it's just mind-boggling. Doing something like that.
It is. Which is why I did it. But it was just rough. And then you'd spend 8 to 9 hours of just slow trekking, and because it's so low, like high altitude, you can't breathe. And so you take one step and you take one more step. It's so slow, and it's beautiful and amazing. And, I'm never going to see those things in my lifetime had I not done it. It was amazing. But obviously I needed something to think about while I was there. And so while I was there, I had a pencil and a pad, and every night after journaling out how I miss my family and I'm so nervous and, etc. I wish I had a real toilet. And then after journaling all that out, I would actually plan this other novel, which was going to be this action thriller. It had an Australian Federal Police agent and his family, and it was like this attack, and it was running around Melbourne. It had all these different characters, and it was going to be like a crowd pleaser. It was going to be something that I love reading that stuff,
who doesn't? Yeah.
That's some of my favorite books are just fun action. It was an action thriller, really. So when I got back to Australia in late February of 2020, which, I immediately had to stay inside my house for 4 weeks because I'd flown from an Asian country, back in the days of early COVID. Yeah. So while I was locked inside and we had the year of 2020, I wrote this whole book. I wrote 90,000 words.
Oh, wow.
I loved it. I had beta readers read it. I got feedback. I practiced. I drafted, and I was just feeling really good about it. My agent, she had a few questions, but she liked it enough to send it to my publisher. But then the publisher did not like it.
Oh, okay.
And I was
probably
waiting.
Not the result you were hoping for.
No. So I was waiting for weeks to hear back. And this is not a nice or pleasant call for the publisher to make, obviously.
Yeah.
That we have a relationship, and so it's not a nice thing to do. But my publishers did say, we're just not seeing this one. And she actually gave it to a few other people in the publishing house as well. And they all sort of were like, oh yeah, we're not really feeling this. It's not really quite what we think Ben is best at. And that made me feel really, really down on myself and my abilities. Cause you just start to go like, I thought this was good. And you start to question your own taste. And if your taste is broken, you're like, am I ever going to write anything again? Like, is that it? Am I done? Yeah. And I felt that acutely for about 1 week. But then I found my old file of Lacey.
Like a gold bar in the bottom drawer.
Like a gold bar. That's a good way. Yeah. And I found it, and I wanted... And I thought as soon as I found it, I was really excited because I thought to myself, I am going to write this book come hell or high water. Like, I don't care if it gets published. I'm going to make this the best thing I've ever done in my entire life. I'm going to just work at it. And if no one likes this, then that's it. That's fine. I've at least gone out with my head held high. I've got some pride, and even if no one likes this, I'm going to make damn sure that I like it. I know that this is good. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I'm pleased with it. And so then began years and years of reading a lot and having conversations with people, and, working with the Wadawurrung people as well, and doing just endless amounts of reading about the Gold Rush and the Forgotten Rebels of Eureka. And, I had dictionaries of Gold Rush slang, and I just poured everything I could into that book. And, and then I wound up people liked it. That's where the idea came from, I guess. Sorry, I answered that question in a really long way.
No, in a fantastic way. So, I mean, you're writing one book in the notepad of your mind in sub-zero temperatures in Nepal, and come back and one thing leads to another, and you do a complete turnaround, which is, I got to imagine, as a writer myself, it'd be hard to just have to sort of, well, for the moment at least, shut down a book entirely and just go, well, that one's off the card table today, it's done. It'd be pretty hard. But the fact that, you've turned around and you had that, the kernel, the backbone of the John Lacey story there, I mean, it's almost a bit of fate, isn't it? Yeah, it feels a little that way. It was... I've had a few people, because I've told this story to a few people, I had a few people ask me, well, is that still something that you might get back out and have a look at again? Is that something that you still would like to publish in the future? Or did you go to any other publishers? And no, I didn't go to any other publishers. And no, I don't think I'll get that out again in the future. I think I worked out a lot in that book, and I had a great time writing it. But there comes a point where you do have to trust your publisher. And I have a good relationship with my publisher. And I really do think that she was saving me from myself a little bit with saying no to me with that, It would have been a very different conversation if we'd been talking about that particular book, whether or not it, you know what I mean? I just don't think it was as good. Yeah.
And sometimes you need a person to tell you that. And I think I'm happy with where it's sitting at the moment. Beautiful. But yeah, it can also say to you, after that week and I started to get back into Lacey, I felt I almost felt relieved, which is a little bit of a sign, I think, that maybe I wasn't as certain on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even though that's how I felt, I don't think I really truly was deep down.
Yeah, I've scrapped a few that I thought I was in love with, and then I've realised that I wasn't being true to myself. And when I admit that, then it's a relief to let it go. And likewise with a lot of musical pieces, when went back, when I was writing a lot of music, I possibly did stuff that I wanted to sound good, convinced myself sound good, maybe even, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'd cling to it for dear life, but then when I was like really true to myself, be like, no, and I'll start on something new. And yeah, there's no regret. There's all, like you said, a bit of a relief, because the next part is more true to yourself, and so instantly there's a much better relationship with the
100%. 100%. It's not an easy decision. It's not an easy way. Like I'm really grateful for my publisher, because I don't know whether I would have that keener sense of insight onto my own thing. Like I wish I did. It's kind of nerve-wracking to me that I didn't see it. You know what I mean? Like if I'm going and producing something else right now, there's always that thing in the back of my mind. Is this actually good? Like I still have that doubt about my own taste.
Well, our passion and excitement, we sometimes we need those people that can come in like clinical surgeons and go, while we've got the music cranking and it's like, this is the best ever. But yeah.
You need to be able to trust the people with that though, because depending on the person who you give your work to, it just depends on them. It depends on their taste. And
exactly.
My publisher knows what she's talking about in regard to the industry, in regard to what's good literature. And, I have a very deep trust there, and I know that she wouldn't make that call. Like she's not doing it to, she's not pushing me down to stop me from achieving this beautiful work that I've etched out with my chisel and my stone. You know what I mean? Like it's much more, you know what, going back, Darren, it's a mercy.
There you go. A bit of mercy and guiding you to your victory, not ending anything. It's guiding you towards, the better part.
Could have ended it though.
Yourself.
Could have ended it. Like if I could have gone down a different way, man. Like I could have just given up. The number of times over the course of, 15 years or whatever I've been writing now, the number of times that I could have just very easily given in, and the number of times I was right next to doing that. It's remarkable that I'm on this podcast today in some respects, I think.
Obviously it's a unique journey because you started it, you popped it away, fate would bring it back through twists and turns, and also thanks to what I gather is a fantastic relationship with your publisher. Now you mentioned there was a lot of research, but I am curious because obviously that's a normal question. Hey, what was your research like? But you brought up a really interesting point in the sense of that one of your hesitations was an area of history and culture that perhaps that I would definitely be completely green about. I wouldn't know how to approach it, how to begin it. I could definitely, I'm sure most of us could, within 5 minutes, get a whole bunch of information about the gold rush and all the fun facts and learn all about it. But when it comes to First Nations people, their story, their role, how the roles they played, what the gold rush meant for them, where do you start doing your research for that?
That was the prime concern, not to add to particularly terrible history that white authors have of representing First Nations people in our country. It's pretty drastic, and it was the biggest concern. And honestly, man, it's still the thing that I think about the most, which I think is good. I wouldn't want to just walk in and like a bull just plow through all these issues and concerns and rightful concerns. You know what I mean? Like I'm glad I don't feel entirely comfortable with it. Where did I start? I found the people group which are the Wadawurrung people near where the gold rush happened, all the way down to sort of Geelong area. And I got in touch, and I felt really strange getting in touch, but I got in touch and I said, I'm working on this novel that's set in this area during the gold rush. I would love to, chat with someone. I would love to talk about, what sort of stories I should avoid telling, and how to be culturally sensitive, how to have decent representation and things like that. And so that was the first thing, is just to go to the people that book is concerned with. You know what I mean?
Seems so obvious, doesn't it? But I could imagine it was a pretty, it wouldn't be an easy thing to do, to just sort of step into a whole, I guess, world that's
it's more to do. Yeah. It's more to do with I just felt like I was taking. I just felt like by going in and asking, "Can I please write about you?" I felt like I was taking still. And it felt, I don't like that feeling even now. And that's the main thing I've tried to avoid, is that idea. But I they put me in touch with an artist named Marlene Gilson. And she is amazing and so down to earth as well. Like when I called her up for the first time, I was so nervous, and I was just really trying to be as polite as I could be and as thoughtful as I could be. But she was so down to earth and just like, what are you doing? Just talk to me. And she was so good. She put me at ease instantly. So I talked to her a lot about all the different things within the book. But the biggest thing she did, which is still so remarkable to me, is that she actually read a very early draft of the book. And she sent me back notes, and she doesn't actually have access to she doesn't know how to work email or a computer, and so she hand wrote all these notes, and then her son took photos of them and emailed them to me.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I've still got these notes, and she actually helped change the ending a little bit as well. She actually helped shape the book, but that I can't describe how the book wouldn't be here without her. You know what I mean? Like, it just would not exist. So that was the biggest thing. And getting those notes,
what a great decision to make, to go to that effort.
Yeah. And look, I certainly don't want to try to pretend to describe the exact way. Like, I think if a person was ever interested in writing Australian history, the very, very first thing would be to ask, why are you interested in telling the story? And then the second thing would be, I think, to always just go to the people who you're writing about, and to just go in with the mindset of, if I shouldn't touch this, I'm not going to touch it. You know what I mean? Go in with the mindset of actually listening. And if this project is something that's corrupted from the start, then I shouldn't write it, and I won't write it. If you go in with that attitude, I think hopefully that would be the best course of action. But again, I don't pretend to prescribe that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And what about, was gold something that you learned a little bit about? I mean, was there anything interesting about gold that you weren't aware of, or did you gain a new respect for gold? I mean, I think I've always thought it's just crazy, chasing this shiny rock, and but that little shiny rock's just changed so much, hasn't it? It's changed people, it's changed societies, countries, nations, religions, all sorts. It's fascinating, really.
Well, it's not. I don't think. Well, it is. I mean, it's certainly a lust for that color, as they put it, but it's certainly it's the power. It's that feeling of, it's gambling. It's just absolute gambling, with the stakes being, with a lot of these people, a lot of these prospectors, the stakes were their lives. They went out to these places and they just completely decimated the land there. Like, they completely destroyed the land in their endeavors, in their lust, for this, but also from their desperation. Like, a lot of them were starving for something. A lot of them weren't, but a lot of them were just starving for money, for food. And there were so many desperate people there, but they just, I learned about, they would wreck they just dug everywhere. And this land that was once used by the Wadawurrung people was just completely destroyed, and without any thought at all, But the stuff I learned, there was this great book. It was called Gold, Gold, Gold. And it was a book that it was taken from journals that the prospectors had written to each other in the time period. But it was it was like a dictionary of all the words that they would use.
Okay.
And then it would have the excerpts from the journals. And man, that stuff is the stuff. Oh, I fall in love with that stuff. The language, like alluvial gold and following a seam and all those different things that they would do, and
in completely rough conditions too.
Oh, just dreadful. absolutely dreadful conditions. But see, John Lacey in this town is trying to put himself in a position where he can be the most powerful person there. So he sets up a storehouse where they would sell goods and merchandise and things like that. And because he struck it rich at a different place, but he secretly has this lust for gold as well. But yeah, he sort of uses people's greed to make money for himself. You know what I mean?
I'm not going to make any jokes about sports bet.
Man, it was absolute gambling. And I went down. So because of COVID, and then because of COVID, and then because of lockdowns, and then because I had COVID and etc. I booked about 4 different flights to go down and actually meet Marlene and actually, go to Sovereign Hill and actually touch the dirt and feel the pans. And I didn't end up getting to go down there until December last year.
And have they still got the really the bowling alleys, which are the real thin rolling sections?
The bowling? Oh, what do you mean down the streets?
Yeah, in Sovereign Hill in the recreated town.
Oh, I guess so. Yeah, I didn't think of calling them bowling alleys.
Oh no! Literally, there was when I was a kid. When I went there a couple of times, it was like a bowling alley, but instead of like a nice big wide bowling, I don't know what you call them. I'm not a technical bowler, but it was like really thin, so you basically had to balance the ball all the way down. But of course, right. you get the hard boiled lollies there too. So I don't know.
Yes, I did buy some hard.
They're still there.
Yeah, I bought some, but then I accidentally left them in the rental car.
Oh no!
The rental car place got some boiled lollies. But yeah, I did get that sense of I did pan for some gold. I was there. I went and met Marlene. I flew down. I went and met Marlene. I had a great time with her. I had a cup of tea with her. I gave her a copy of the book, like an early copy, which was really special. And I got to see her art in person as well. And she's a miraculous artist. If you ever look up Marlene Gilson's art, she's an amazing artist herself. And then when I finally got to Ballarat and Sovereign Hill, I had 1 hour before they shut.
Oh.
So I ran around. I went into this mine. I just did as much as I could, but I did go and pan for gold, and I did feel that sting of I'll just have another look. I'll have one more swish, just one more. The next one I might, and I don't need it. Like imagine trying to feed your family doing that. It's so.
Oh, and imagine imagine having to go back empty-handed after a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of just going through hell just to try and get some food, or at least get that shining rock to convert to some sort of bartering ability for food, and having to go back with cracked hands and sunburned face and saying sorry. There
were a lot of families on the field as well. Like a lot of the men did actually bring their families out. So there were children, there were the ever suffering wives.
Hoping for that big nugget. That's it. Hoping for that big nugget.
Yeah. And yeah, it's miraculous to think about that people survive those conditions. And a lot of people, especially someone like John Lacey, but other people who he surrounds himself with as well, they did some pretty horrible things. But Lacey's different because he doesn't just want to survive. He doesn't want to feed himself and his family. He wants power over other people. He wants to be the one in control. So he's worse, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the podcast just isn't long enough to get into discussions about the psychology behind people that want to be in control of other people, or people that get addicted to huge sums of money, where you can only sleep in one bed, you can only cook in one kitchen.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You can't. What is? Why do you need 10 kitchens? It doesn't. It makes no sense. That's like a. For me, that's a sickness, but that's a whole different thing. But it's one thing if the sickness doesn't affect anybody, but if the sickness, especially if it can affect a whole town, then that's a completely different story.
No, that was one of the things I thought was most interesting about him, was that, like you say, that sickness and that power over others. But those sorts of people are easy to follow, and I think it's
easy to find today too.
That's exactly it, man. Like a lot of politicians, a lot of CEOs, a lot of people up in positions of power, and even small little positions of power, they can just feel this sense of like, I'm right and you're wrong, and but they're easy to follow because they do make those decisions. And it's like I get to unshelf myself of that burden or responsibility of actually making an ethical decision about a topic or an issue. I'll just follow that person. They make all those decisions. It's a type of charisma there, hey, and that's what I think John Lacey does. I think he kind of inspires people around him. Like he's easy to follow. He was easy to write because he doesn't care. And it's almost, I mean, it sounds horrible, but it's almost like I kind of wouldn't it be easier to not care?
Well, and that's the unique sort of point to ponder, isn't it? Because you mentioned that, to follow somebody because let them make some of the decisions takes a bit of the burden off. And I think that touches on that point as well, in the sense of sometimes someone has to make a decision from a position of zero care, whether it be for right or wrong, even especially considering that a lot of decisions are going to be devastating to someone no matter what the decision is.
Yes.
And, by a lot of us probably know that in order to get through life, we have to be in a position sometimes where we've got to switch off our mercy, our care factor, our compassion, because it's just not suitable, but most of us can't. And I'm wondering if that's why we can so easily be in a position where, I can speak for myself. I'm not in a position where I'm going to wake up tomorrow and trying to obtain power over other people.
No, I don't want that either.
But there are other people that do, and are they a necessary function? I think they are.
Yeah. I mean, that's again some of the favorite stories I watch. But you watch those people who have to make a decision. It's the trolley problem, right? Do you kill 5 people on this track, or do you switch the tracks and kill this one person over here? And it's the trolley problem. Like, man, someone else can do that. I want to stand over here and just think about it, but
that's why they invented AI. No one has to make the decision now.
But someone has to make the choice, and they oftentimes can become very corrupted and then start to do things that only serve themselves. And I think it's very rare to find a true leader who looks after the welfare of the people beneath them in a humble and non-proud kind of way.
I always believe, no matter what the situation, if you can actually peer behind the curtain, there's always going to be shock and awe. Because there's what the stage that we play on, and then depending on the role you're doing or the role you're seeking or the knowledge you're searching for, careful what you wish for. Sometimes it can be a case of come here, come behind the curtain for a sec, and you may never be the same again. And I can imagine that, especially in high up ruthless positions of power.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a whole different game going on behind the curtains. But speaking of morals and those harsh, difficult circumstances where families and miners in the hunt for gold went through, if you were to wake up tomorrow in the middle of the Victorian gold rush, I'm curious, would you be in the mining game or would you be selling the picks and buckets?
I think I'd be in the picks and buckets, but I also will be getting my family into a horse and buggy and going somewhere far away from the gold fields.
That's probably a good decision, because otherwise, no matter which way you look at it, it's profiting on heartbreak, and that's really to a certain degree.
I mean, that's a huge topic in and of itself, but a lot of people back then were doing exactly that, and sometimes without their full knowledge, but it's always on the back of someone else's,
And do you believe in the rumour that, that is, if you've heard the rumour that there is a huge gold deposit in North SA, North South Australia, out in the mines there?
I haven't heard that rumour, no.
No, so apparently it is so massive, like it's all underground, obviously, that they've concreted over the whole thing, simply because if it were to be, the cat gets out the bag, the global market of gold would be thrown into complete array.
Is that for real?
That's a for real rumour, and I've heard it from multiple sources out at Roxby there. It's out the mines.
That sounds... Sorry, who's pouring the concrete on the gold?
The what is it, BHP?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like it's in one of their massive industrial, like just ginormous city under the ground. But apparently they found like just this huge thing of gold that, they could pull it out, but then it just would, it'd throw the markets out. Sure. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's something that keeps popping up over and over again.
That's interesting. I would probably reserve my judgment on that. I think I'll wait to see that one.
Oh, fair. The other thing I remember reading years ago was, I can't remember the name of this doctor or scientist, but he was saying that if you want to sort of see the rumblings and start of a new world war, a nuclear war, watch the price of gold, because apparently that'll start skyrocketing. So that gold hasn't really gone crazy, so I'm kind of feeling safe about the world at the moment, but I do keep an eye on it.
I'm glad you're feeling safe. But see, that part of the gold thing was less interesting to me than what the crazy hunger people had for it. That was the thing that really, I mean, I guess people still do, but that was the thing that really interested me. And then the old ways of technology and stuff like that they would use to find it. I thought that was really interesting too. I don't know. It's a volatile world we live in, that's for sure.
And obviously the book also involves a little bit of a reflection on brothers' relationship too. And did you go in wanting to explore that sort of avenue as well, or was that kind of something that grew organically within the writing process?
I think it grew really organically because I wanted John Lacey to, what would be the word? I guess in the novel, not to spoil too much, he does end up becoming obscenely rich. And he kind of builds this township called Lacey. He builds this township and he's like, this is my legacy. This is my town. And he kind of commands this town around him. And what I wanted in that town was I wanted someone to have to stand up to John Lacey. And I needed a reason for that person to stand up against this evil, like this overwhelmingly powerful, this person who's cutthroat, will do anything. I wanted someone good, someone who was actually attempting to be a good person in the face of this person who doesn't care about right and wrong, So I had to go all the way back and I had to create these characters who would run afoul of John Lacey. And they were these brothers Montague. And they have an opening chapter, which I won't spoil the chapter either, but these two brothers kind of end up going on the run, and then they run afoul of John Lacey, and I guess he's after them, and then someone has to sort of stand in between the brothers and John Lacey to sort of protect the brothers. And what would you do in that situation? Would you protect these people who are criminals, in inverted commas, these people who aren't people and then John Lacey threatening your family and things like that? Like, how far would you be willing to go to actually stand up against a person like John Lacey, especially when you're not equipped to do that?
So a little bit of a showdown, and it is described a bit of as a bit of a Western, an Australian Western, isn't it? Yeah,
as a big Western's sort of the other thing that I really wanted to write. I love, again, I just think the thing I love about the Western is how it, especially when it's done well, to me, it just really strips back there's a lot of modern concerns that we have. And I feel like when you were in that position, you didn't have the luxury of having a lot of concerns that modern people can have sometimes. You were just looking to survive, or you were just looking to, literally feed your family the next night. And it makes things a lot simpler and winnows everything down to the real essentials of what does it mean to have meaning? What does it mean to be good? What does it mean to, what would you do to survive? And that's what I like about Westerns that I read and watch. But my dad gave me Westerns when I was a kid, like old Louis L'Amour books and things like that, which I loved. Yeah, it's definitely a Western, I would say, especially that showdown, good and evil and all those sorts of things, I think.
It's funny how reading characters who don't have time to reflect on anything, because it is just survival and making decisions just to maintain survival and, coming out of life or death. But reading about characters in situations that are nothing but survival and, their language, their customs, their approach to things is based with no reflection, gives us the chance to reflect.
Yes.
So it's pretty funny.
Yes,
but,
exactly.
I was reading some of the reviews for The Death of John Lacey, and one of the reviews mentioned, I'll quote it here. In the author's notes, Ben Hobson wants us to be aware that there are attitudes and beliefs in this book that would not be tolerated today. There are, and I am for one glad they were included. For better or for worse, that is our history. While this story might be fiction, many people would have lived something similar. And I thought that was quite a powerful little statement. And I think it also raises, I guess, a concern that many writers have come across now that, you know, when you're setting a prose in times gone by, that there's a lot of hurdles. So I'm wondering how you approached it in the sense of, you know, being true to the culture of the time, but at the same time being aware, you know, that readers today, realistically, we have to come to the understanding that they're approaching literature and culture with new philosophies and new expectations when it comes to the art of language and our appreciation of each other. Do you think I think it's important to keep things, if you're reflecting upon a time, you have to be truthful and honest about it. I think.
You can't. You can't gloss over it. Like, you can't sugarcoat it. It was pretty terrible. It was because it would ring inauthentic.
But then how you do it without, you know, for today's audience, which is
being just an awful person and adding to a very difficult balance. Just laboured over that stuff. I went to the Black and White program through the State Library of Queensland. They have this awesome Black and White program, and I hired a sensitivity reader who would especially read it in regard to representations of First Nations people in literature. And I did that before I had a contract for the book at all, because I didn't want to even show the publisher without my having done the work on that stuff. And they were great. And her name is Cara, and she did a really great job of pushing back in a couple of ways where maybe it was a bit too far and like a bit too repetitious, and you sort of made that note already. But she was just really also down to earth and said, you know, this was unfortunately the way it was, which I think you've really captured here as well. So I guess always erring on the side of caution. And, you know, if there's any language in the book that is a little sensitive, I have laboured over whether or not to put it there. And it's always in a position of, I only use that stuff when it's very necessary for the work of the book to continue. But yeah, I would always err on the side of not, in fact. But in order to be authentic, it is a very difficult balancing act. And I would encourage not just sensitivity reads, but also, you know, talking with people who your book concerns. You know, there's another character in the book. His name's Gilbert, and he is a minister, an Anglican minister, and he has a type of, I would call it a type of obsessive compulsive disorder. And so a lot of the time he is very concerned with doing the right thing, and it sometimes manifests in this way where he can't move, and he sort of gets locked in a place unless he does a thing a certain way. But, you know, I talked to my friend especially who went through a very severe time where he had obsessive compulsive disorder when he was a younger man. I read a lot of literature on that as well, but I have to be very sensitive with that as well, because he was an Anglican minister. So the way what he thinks it is demonic. It's a demonic attack, you know, which is true to how people would have seen it back then, that something's stopping him from moving. You know what I mean? So while that's true, you know, I'm certainly not wanting to say that I think that mental illness is demonic. You know what I mean? And I think that's fairly an obvious distinction. And I guess, you know what else, Darren, like the other problem is, like, I can't control how people will read that stuff either.
That's
like,
right.
I just do my best and most sensitive and thoughtful job that I can possibly do. But yeah, unfortunately, I mean, well, you know what we were talking about before, maybe it's not unfortunate. I can't control what people take away from that stuff.
No, I think it sounds like, you know, it doesn't sound like you've absolutely shown a whole heap of respect both to the reader, to yourself, and to, you know, the cultures involved. I mean, just by doing what you've done with, you know, having specific readers go through, you know, go to visit down, you know, First Nations representative down there in Victoria, you know, talk to your friend. These are all respectful and important things to do. But you're right, at the end of the day, people are going to interpret how they want to interpret. And the day that book or a novel can no longer, if we ever reach a time where dangerous is not a word that we can use to describe books, then I'm out, because books are the last frontier of danger, in the sense of that sometimes they're also the easiest things to not be a part of. So if you find yourself the words aren't for you or something doesn't sit right, you can just close the pages. A book is a very intimate and personal thing, but in the good way, in a positive way, I think they can be dangerous. They can
that's it, and that's
outside the square.
That's why that little thing at the start is important to have right at the start, like the author's note. And that was actually a suggestion from Cara as well, to actually put that at the start. So as a person enters the book, they know I'm not saying these things are a good thing. You know what I mean? Just make it really clear, like, this is stuff we shouldn't tolerate nowadays. If a person reads it in that negative way where they're trying to find something horrible in there to justify their own horribleness, like they don't have any excuse. Like I've just said straight up, this is not good. And that's why it's important that it's there,
Yeah. And is historical fiction a genre you'll step your toes into again?
Yeah, I think so. I've got another one set in a similar time period that I've started work on. Yeah. Well, I'm at a bit of a crossroads, Darren. I've got two things that I'm working on, and one of them is this thing. And then I've sort of started work on this other thing, and this other thing is the thing that's making me excited at the moment. So,
okay.
I think I will go back, but no,
I sense a love triangle here.
The next one I've started is very modern, like it's set now, and it's reliant on the now. So I am actually enjoying, not having to think about, did they have insect repellent? How would they, going through those thousands of questions.
How did they cut their hair? Now, Ben, do you have a writing routine, or do you just strike when the iron's hot now, especially considering you're working on two projects?
Well, man, I'm not working on it because I haven't got a good routine. I'll be real. It's always been difficult to make the time, and as I've grown older with more and more responsibilities, it's become increasingly difficult to carve out the time every day to write. You know what though, Darren? It's not because it's not, you know what? It's not hard to carve out the time to write. I have half an hour every day. It's hard, and I don't want to do hard work. The same way that when you're wanting to get fit, you don't want to go to the gym.
Yeah, I think for many of us, the time we can find is the time we can shave off the alarm clock. And that's the hard part. It really is, because you can have all the motivation in the world at 1 a.m, go, right, I'm up at 5:30. Allocate 45 minutes a day, or 60 minutes a day. That's 5 hours a week, and that's easily achievable. And of course, at 5:30, you're like, oh no.
Yeah. Well, so when I was writing the majority of Lacey, I was writing in the morning, and I am pretty good. I was getting up at 5:30 and writing, and I was pretty consistent with that. And that's where most of Lacey got written. But this last year, I've started to do exercise first thing in the morning. So I get up at 4:30 every day to go do exercise with my mate at gym. And at the moment, my plan is to write when I get home from work in the afternoon. But I'm finding it, by the time I get home from my day job, I am just completely obliterated as far as energy. And I feel like writing requires all of me. And I guess this is just... It's kind of an excuse too, because when I sit down and start, I feel great and I smash it as much as I can each day. But it's the getting there. It's the getting there to sit down and go, like, I'm dedicating this. I've only ever done 30 minutes, and I generally get about 1,000 words in those 30 minutes. But it's just the discipline of sitting down in front of your computer with the intention of, I am going to write. The same way as, again, I liken it to exercise. When I get to the gym, I'm fine. I can do exercise. That's great. I'm happy to be there. But it's getting in the car to go to gym. That's the tricky bit.
You've got to fast forward in time, don't you? You have to remind yourself how good you're going to feel, and how horrible it felt to go there last time, but how good you felt walking out. Or how good it felt to get up early and finish that chapter that morning, as opposed to staying in bed.
I've always said I don't necessarily enjoy writing, but I enjoy having written.
Exactly, yeah, the result, which is what we want to achieve, is we want to achieve those words on paper. And it's not always going to be pleasure because it's hard. If it's easy, everyone in the world would be doing it.
It's a joy, and it is an absolute pleasure, but it's the starting that's hard. It's just, it takes from you, and it's a beautiful thing, but it's very, like, I'm a high school teacher, man, so I get home and like, I don't want to do stuff.
Well, are there any tricks that you've picked up along the way when it comes to writing that you might want to share? Like anything that you were surprised to learn and wish you'd known a bit earlier?
I hope I've learned a lot over the course of the years of doing the thing. I think the biggest thing I've learned is to not question my subconscious.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, I guess it's a type of trust in yourself, I guess. But when I'm writing a scene and I'm getting to the point where I can actually feel like I'm watching this scene unfold, instead of creating words onto a page, I'm watching something unfold, and it's almost like I'm dictating the action as it happens. But when a character in those moments does something interesting, not to shut that down because it's not fitting in with what you thought the scene should be, but to instead allow that character to do that thing, or allow that person in that scene to notice this specific thing. That would probably be my biggest takeaway. There's a lot of instances I could refer to, but there's one I always think of with Snake Island. I had this scene where the father is driving up to this criminal's house, and it's supposed to be this really eerie, sort of not a pleasant looking place. And as I was writing it, I noticed that the dad in the book Vernon was looking out onto the veranda, and he saw a dead pig sort of strung up by its haunches, sort of swinging there in the breeze. And I thought, oh, that's good. And I hadn't thought to put that in, but I sort of noticed that it was there. Which sounds a bit silly because I am still creating it, but it's a different frame.
No, that doesn't sound silly at all.
Yeah, a different way of creating, I guess. And I think it came from my friend, the same friend I was talking about before with the OCD. It came from him describing a scary house that he went to when he was a kid, and why it had frightened him. But I wrote that, and then later on there came a scene in the house where there was this fight that broke out between a father and a son, these criminals, and the fight spilled out onto the veranda. And I thought, oh my, like I set this up. There's this pig out here. And so it turned into this really awful scene where he sort of stuffs his son's head into the guts of the pig, and it's really gross and vibrant and interesting and awful. But I sort of accidentally set that up. And because I trusted my subconscious, like I'm setting this up for a purpose, it just slotted in later on. And it always feels like a miracle when that happens, but it happens a bunch of times. There's a little, people, I don't know when this podcast is going out, but people might have read Death of John Lacey. There's a specific thing with a knife that comes back a couple of times in the book. But that, again, was just something that I'd noticed. He just had this knife, and then it just became this thing that came all the way through the book. And I don't know, I guess that would be my advice, is to just trust your guts a little bit.
Yeah, well, I love that advice, and I love that you went to the trouble of giving an example, because I think that's such a amazingly awesome example. And I think it kind of wraps a bow around things nicely, because it comes back to the start when we're discussing the muse and how and I agree, you said probably not the right words, because I don't know what words, but you used a beautiful word, and that is you when you get into the flow. And then from that flow you really are becoming one with your subconscious. And I think sometimes when you get in that flow state, or when with muse, whatever, however you want to describe it, when you sit down for an hour and you put stuff down, and then you stop and you sort of look at everything there, all these words and symbols, and you can kind of look at it abstractly and say, where did that actually come from? I mean, you can have an idea in your head about certain things, but you didn't have every word thought out. You didn't have every beat, every moment. You had like maybe a couple of checkpoints that may not even exist anymore.
Pretty cool, huh? It's like your conscious mind has to think a thought, and then that thought becomes a thing. But I mean, it's like speaking, man. Like when you're speaking to me right now, we're not pre-thinking what we're saying.
That's right. Hence why I keep jumping over my tongue.
But it's so interesting that our words come out the moment we actually think of the word to say. It's not like we're thinking, okay, say this. There's a couple of times, obviously you have to think through what you're saying, but most of the time when we're just speaking like this, when I'm saying this right now, I'm becoming very acutely aware of the words I'm using. So I'm getting a bit funny.
I think that the speed at which our internal, synapses and neuronic pathways can work. I mean, literally, it's electricity. So I guess on one hand, it is the speed of light, which by its very nature moves itself in time. But I think it just moves such a fast pace that, there's a million transactions going between me opening my lips and the sound coming out. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Now, think about what is doing the thinking as we're speaking right now. What's thinking right now?
Well, for want of a better word, I would say the soul. That's my sort of thought.
I just read the those two new Cormac McCarthy books, and this is something that he is super interested in. Is this idea of like, what is this part of the mind and how does it work? And it's very interesting stuff. But I feel like sometimes, I also feel like it's kind of like prayer when you get to that certain point. Like it's like you're discovering stuff. Instead of creating stuff, it's you're discovering stuff about yourself and about your relationships with everything to do with life. And if you can get to that point with writing, I think that's the best sort of thing. I think that's where I feel the most happy with what I do.
Because we're exploring, whether, and if we're not physically writing and exploring in our mind, an aspect of that writing mind is exploring when we're doing our everyday activities. And when you ask what does the thinking, I like to think of, again, words, I'll use the word soul, but let's just say, something that inhabits this flesh and bone. It comes from a point in existence, in time and space, wherever, that is far more, maybe breaks from a source of huge knowledge, say from a hive mind, it splits off. But being in this body, it's actually restrained. And so it has to function through this brain, function through these fingers. Hence, when we get damaged, things go wrong. And we are exploring. I mean, that's what we're doing, aren't we? We're exploring the world around us in a vessel that I have no understanding of. No manual.
But see, if you can get to that point, it's like you don't need to. I doubt my own ability to analyze and think things through. I think it makes my writing seem fake if I get to that point. I want to start from the point of my intuition, I guess. And then you can put on your craft and your editing and you can think things through later on. But if you can start from those guts, it's much more vibrant writing, I think.
Enjoy the dance with the magic, then you can go back over the tape and find out where you went wrong.
Exactly.
Do the replay later. Now, very quickly, knowing what you know now, this is a question I've been meaning to ask you, but it kind of comes down to, the tricks. But knowing what you know now, when it comes to writing and, being trusting your intuition, what piece of advice would you give the little Ben Hobson, who was just about to start writing, if you could go back in time and whisper in his ear?
Oh, geez. I would say don't be so worried about what people think of you.
Oh, that's a good, important one. I wish someone whispered that hard in my ear.
Right. Yeah, and if I could have believed that, because I think if I had said that to myself when I was that young, I just would have been like, you don't know what you're doing. But it's my biggest thing is worrying too much about how people will react to the things I do and say. And I let it change what I do. And so with writing, I think for a very long time, I was very absorbed with trying my best to please everybody. And that's not to say that you shouldn't bear the reader in mind when you write. I think you definitely should, but to start from that place, and to me, it was a very negative thing, so I was worrying too much about it. I would say don't worry so much about trying to make people like you, and instead just concentrate on having fun and doing the thing you love. Yeah.
Enjoying yourself, yeah. All of us at some point, we want to shoot for the moon and beyond. there's no point burning all that fuel on wasteful stuff. And I know I've burnt through a few barrels of fuel over the years worrying about,
for sure.
do you know what I mean? Like, and that fuel could have been used to send that rocket further into space. So I just hope I've got a few barrels of rocket fuel left so that I can use it.
I
for
think
ignition.
you do, man. I think it sounds like you do.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. All right, so the last question before we go into what's in store for you for 2023, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast, but I want you to imagine that we are, well, I've been digging in the goldfields, and you're sitting in a table in the relative cool of a salon in the little town. And after a couple of days, I haven't got much in the way of gold. I'm sunburned, I'm dusty, my skin's cracking, I'm hungry, my boots are torn, my toes are exposed. I've got just enough to head to the only tavern in town. I've got no family there. I'm at the bar, sipping on what I have to assume was warm, sort of some foul concoction back then. But convincing myself I'm enjoying it. Now, along comes beside me none other than yourself, tapping a nice clean finger on a brand new copy of The Death of John Lacey. I've only got a few coins in my pocket. What is your guaranteed sales pitch for me to grab that book?
No, don't ask me that. I'm still, I don't know how to sell this book. You know what?
What can readers? What are readers in store for? Action, drama.
I think at the end of the day, if you want a book that will make you think about Australia and your place in it, hopefully this will be a book that'll do that. That would be what I'd say. And hopefully it's wrapped into a type of a page-turning package. But yeah, if you want to be a bit confronted and uneasy with your art or your fiction, I would read my book.
I think that's an excellent sales pitch there.
Not to everyone, man. Some people, people hearing me will be like, "Oh, I'm out."
No, I think that was excellent. And next, what we have to do now is organise, invent some sort of refrigeration, and we can make the real money out here in this gold mining town. But no, Ben, what is in store for you in 2023?
I'm actually teaching a bunch of writing courses this year through the Faber Academy and through the Queensland Writers Centre. A lot of them are online, and so they're like a weekly course that you do, and one's called Kickstart Your Novel, and the other one I think is more to do with like getting feedback on novel writing and things like that. So I'm really excited for that. And then I want to continue to write this book that I'm finding extremely fun to write. It's a very light-hearted thing, I think, this next thing I'm writing. So I'm just enjoying that. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that 30-minute discipline every day, you know.
Make it 45. No,
don't stretch things too far.
It sounds like you've just got so much going on. That's amazing, and it must be feeling pretty damn exciting and pretty good to be getting an invitation to Sovereign Hill.
Darren, the other thing I'm doing, I'm actually having every Tuesday off this year. So I'm doing a 4-day week at work. So I'm actually doing Tuesdays. I'm doing just writing stuff. So I'm giving myself a day. I know, for the first time ever.
Wow, that is a massive epic change, though, isn't it? Is that something you negotiated? Or
yeah, I did. Yeah, at work. But they're really Queensland Education are really awesome, and they've always really encouraged me and the people I work with at my high school. So, I'm really excited to do that. But if anyone's
so your rocket's only just starting.
Maybe. If anyone wants to do any of the courses or anything, I update all the things I do on my website, benhobson.net. But yeah, I especially would love to. I love teaching writing. So if anyone's interested, absolutely come along.
Well, look, of course, we've got a lot of book lovers out there listening to the show, but then
Darren,
we've got a lot of writers.
Sorry, I forgot the other thing I do. I do a podcast, but I also do this other thing called Ben's Book Club, where every month through libraries across Australia, I interview an author about their work, and you can get their book on the Libby app. It's really cool.
How does he get involved in that?
Over the course of the last few years, I've always put my hand up to do a lot of interviews with authors to just platform their work and do their stuff. And then I just did a bunch of that stuff. And then through my publicist, I did a QBD Crime Club, which was an online interview thing. And then I got hired out of that to do another thing with Chris Hammer. And then because I'm friends with Chris, the interview went so well because it was just so relaxed. I got sort of hired on the back of the strength of that to do. And I've run Ben's Book Club for a year now, but it's through the Overdrive people who run the Libby app. and people can rent out Libby. The books that we choose each month, they can rent them out. Or sorry, rent, that's wrong. Borrow them from the Libby app non-exclusively. So that means across Australia, normally if you had an ebook, you would have to return it so someone else can borrow it. But during the month that we choose the book, everybody in Australia can just get it at the same time.
That's awesome.
It is cool. And then every month we talk to the author, and so we get all great questions from the club, and it's really cool. I love those chats that I have every month, but I'm still doing that as well this year. I am busy, Darren. Yeah, maybe I should.
You're definitely busy. And I was just thinking, I mean, look, how lucky are we? I mean, we're just talking about the plights of, miners struggling to find a bit of gold to potentially feed. And look, you and I are both in this amazing position to be able to not only enjoy the craft and challenges, of course, of writing, but also we both have the opportunity to talk with authors, which is just a mind-blowing bonus as well.
Absolutely, man.
You just learn so much from talking to other people. It's an absolute gift. And
I feel the same way.
It sounds like 2023 is just going to be huge for you.
Yep, definitely. I'm feeling really good about it.
And what about, have you explored audiobooks? Is that something that you're going to be looking at down the track?
All my books are audiobooks, and
are they already?
Yeah, yep.
I didn't even realise. There you go.
No, you're right. The new one is read by the same person who read my second one. So Snake Island was read by Stephen Hunter, and I love Stephen, and so I've managed to get him for this new one too. So that should be out at the same time as The Death of John Lacey, which is actually, man, like on record, it's in 2 days. The whole thing hits bookshelves.
Oh yes. So 2 days till launch. There we go.
Yeah, so you should get the audiobook then.
Yeah. And how is it hearing somebody reading your work?
It's awesome. It changes how you think about your work. I tell you that.
I can imagine. I can only imagine.
It also makes you feel really awkward, and you sort of, I don't know about how other authors feel, but I always kind of avoid listening too much because I feel too self-conscious. I'm like, it's because it's different to how it sounded in my head. It just comes out different because there's a different person reading it, which is awesome, but it's not the way it sounded to me. And then I feel self-conscious about it. I'm like, oh no, it sounds awkward, but it's really cool.
Yeah, I'm putting little audio productions together for some of my short stories, and
awesome.
It's a big learning curve in the sense of writing it and how it sounds in my head is one thing, but then to put it into a vocal situation, and maintain that rhythm and those those emphasis on different areas is a whole different ball game, and it makes me go, why did you write it like that?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But
I always read my stuff out. That's how I do a whole draft like that, where I just read the whole thing start to finish out loud, just to feel how it feels. So hopefully that does a job of.
Do you think you've changed writing a little bit since hearing your stuff read out?
No.
That's good.
I don't know though. Maybe I have.
Well, when you're 10 books in, which won't take long, I think, especially now that you got Tuesdays, you'll be able to look back and maybe worry about looking at for that. But I don't think that's a problem to worry about now. But Ben, we have covered so much ground, and I just can't thank you enough for being on the show.
Pleasure.
You're my first interview for 2023, so what a way to kick in what I hope is going to be a stupendously, just gobsmackingly amazing, awesome year. It sounds like yours is off running already. Your rocket ship is on firing on all cylinders. Mars will be in the rearview mirror before you know it. So many projects underway. But look, all I can say is thank you so much, and obviously to all of our listeners out there. The novella is called If the Saddle Breaks My Spine. There's also the debut novel To Become a Whale. There is Snake Island, and of course the reason I've had the honour of chatting with you today, your latest novel, The Death of John Lacey. Ben, thank you so much for chatting with me today, and I just wish you all the best, and I really hope that you'll grace us with maybe popping into one of our Writers' Lounge or popping back for another interview down later this year to let us know what's happening.
I'd love that, man. Yeah, it's been a great talk, man. I've really enjoyed our chat today, so thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you. And to all our listeners, don't wait to find yourself in a dusty tavern or in the middle of goldfields and wait for a stranger to tap on your shoulder and say your book. Jump onto the website, jump onto any book site that you can find books. By the time this podcast comes out, the book will be out. If it sounds like your jam, I know there's going to be a lot of people interested in the tale. How can you not be a Western set in the gold rush, Victoria? Oh, crazy! Evil character running a town. It's got everything. So I hope it goes gangbusters. Ben, thank you so much, buddy.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you to Ben Hobson. What a brilliant chat you had. Covered so many things, and I've written down so many notes and little insights that Ben shared and that you and he kind of explored. There were a lot of rabbit holes, but one that I was interested in particularly, I think that Ben mentioned early in the chat, was that there were messages in his writing that he didn't really know until people came back and said, I really enjoyed your message about whatever. And it's that kind of themes and things that are your life lessons that, kind of write what you need to know. And you are exploring that as you're writing fiction or non-fiction. It really kind of seems to be. And you have your characters sort of doing those things that perhaps deeply hidden are things that you have experienced or you want to experience or that you're working your way through in this life, all those kind of things. So, yeah, it is interesting. When I was writing my fantasy, which I thought was really just about dragons and magic and those kind of things, but in fact, and I think I've talked about this before, it's really about people reaching their absolute potential and not being judged book by its cover, not being constrained by boxes, all of those kind of things. So it really is the same as my coaching, the same as my leadership stuff, the same as my facilitation. It's actually opening the dialogues to let people find out and just make sure that they, expand as big as they need to be. What about you? Do you think the messages in the Hallucigenia project, See the City Red, what are the underlying themes in your work?
Well, I think you're right, and I think, the sort of conversations that come from the discussion with Ben, absolutely, there is this idea, or perhaps the reality that, when you're writing, things may come out that you didn't even realise that you were searching for. Absolutely. I think that may be across all art forms, but as far as writing's concerned, it's, art, so visual art, I think, can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, of course. But, with the written word, and I think that's one of the magical aspects of literature in the sense of there can be so much interpretation. I mean, holy moly, like, let's just take the most popular book on the planet, the Bible. I think there was, at the last count, 36,000 different, versions of Christianity from that. So to interpret the word, but at the same time, there are certain themes that come from reading the words that everyone can agree upon. And sometimes those themes, the author didn't even realise that they were exploring, and then maybe it becomes the truth. And that's just this magical thing. And, you've got Jung's archetype of the collective conscious, you've got the hero's journey. There must be some sort of like cosmic, million colour highway that leads from there that we all sort of tap into, which, again, we discussed a bit of the muse, or both of our different interpretations of the muse. But I think at the end of the day, the art of creation is also the art of exploration of the outside world and the inside world, which is ourselves, isn't it? And that's, it's such a beautiful thing. And when you can, if you're on that journey yourself, which so many of us are, we can enjoy it on those double side of the blade. And that is, while we're trying to create, we may or may not realise what we're trying to search for. And likewise, the art that we indulge in and that we consume. May guide us in different ways. So Ben spoke a little bit about that in also saying about the relationships with art and being in the flow and all of those kind of things. But he also mentioned trusting your subconscious. So don't let your conscious mind overrule the things that you've put out there necessarily, because there'll be messages in it. So there you go, a very interesting chat with Ben Hobson. Thank you very much, Ben. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ben, for so much food for thought, and and for letting us all in for a little glimpse of what it must be like to see all those little turtles running across. And, that may be, in itself a strange symbol for our ideas, for the universe we live in, for life, for the journey, for so many things. But I'll leave that for another book. And
contributing, of course, to the writing industry with more than just the books. He's got his book club and podcast and does some interviewing himself. So that's excellent.
Yep.
It was nice to snaffle him.
Literature and media machine, it's been.
Yes,
and,
yes.
Yeah, I think that we're going to see huge things come from the latest release. And, it was a fantastic opportunity to chat with him. Good. I know it's been a long episode and we could talk for hours
but we're going to be
some things we
super
talked about.
quick. And I'll just say, if you need anything, want to know anything about us, have a look on the website. All of the links are there. How's that for quick?
Well, I was going to say, but what is your quote and what inspired it for episode number 78?
So, okay, my quote was inspired by Ben talking about his relationships with art and sort of, being in the flow and that kind of thing, and then how he'd had a good time with his kids and all of those things. And this is by Hazrat Inayat Khan. So Hazrat Inayat Khan was in fact a professor, an Indian professor of musicology. He was a singer. He was an exponent of the Saraswati Veena, a poet and a philosopher, and a pioneer of the transmission of Sufism to the West. So there you go. And yes, he passed in 1927, so a long time ago. However, I love this quote that he is recorded as saying, "Happiness lies in thinking or doing that which one considers beautiful."
Ooh, see, now you're stepping in that territory of Zen and the art of motorcycle.
Indeed.
Of what is beauty.
Indeed.
Definitely. And that division between, the consciousness and the
yes, and,
unconscious
Ben sort of mentioning about trusting your subconscious and all that kind of thing. You know what, that just works. So, because Ben obviously sounded very happy with his life at the moment, happiness lies in thinking or doing that which one considers beautiful. There you go. So thank you to Hazrat Inayat Khan.
Oh, so that's actually a deep one, isn't it? Because, one person might see something as not to use the word ugly, but or an experience might be uncomfortable, because someone else is like fantastic. So they see it as beautiful, and so it's amazing how our perception of reality can, is a very personal one.
Indeed.
And the reality itself lays there almost like a colourless spectrum, and you need to put your own colour in it. But there we go. But I've actually did a bit of research. Well, no, I didn't do too much research, but for my quote for the episode number 78, I can tell you it was by Svent Georgi, or Albert was his first name, so we'll go with Albert, who was a Hungarian pharmacologist known for his work on vitamins and oxidation, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1937. So he had an interesting quote, and it may not have directly been related to literature, but I think it could be, but ultimately it was related to research, and that was something that Ben really inspired me in his conversation, and the passion that he brought with all the research, and I guess the proactive approach he took to making his novel the best it possibly could be. So the quote by Albert is, "Research is seeing what everybody else has seen and thinking what nobody else has thought."
Ah, yes, I like that one. I must say I've heard that before, and I really like it. It's why people say, aren't there only just 5 stories in the world? And even if there are only sort of 5 templates, no one is going to write it like you, with your experience and your voice and your style and all of those things. So it's,
and of course, whatever everybody else has seen, yes, but they'll be describing it in their way, but they may not have realised that they've described it in a way that reveals something about themselves, which is the snake coming back to bite its tail. So, but I know it's almost time for a tagline, but I thought, it's been a huge episode, and before we go to the tagline, I think maybe we can, maybe it's time to have a quick little drink down in the old, writer's lounge, pour a stiff one, sit back, let that jazz soak up, and maybe relax before we come back with a tagline. What do you think?
Sounds good.
All right, I love the writer's lounge. Let's go in.
book lovers, we are making our way down to the Writers' Lounge, and I must say that I'm feeling a little bit excited because we've got two guests dropping into the Writers' Lounge. First of all, we have Austin Sheehan. G'day, Austin.
Hello.
Now, Austin is a speculative fiction writer, but for today, he is also a critical founder, I was going to say, of Deadset Press, one of our young indie publishing companies in Australia. Would that be a fair thing to say?
That's correct. But by the amount of grey hairs I've got now, I'm not sure how young we are these days.
Okay, good.
Don't feel young.
Now, Austin, I'm up here on Wairarung country, Wurundjeri. Whereabouts are you coming from today?
Exactly the same place, just around the corner.
Yeah, we just discovered that we were neighbours, so that is hilarious, which is fantastic and delightful to hear. Now, if Austin is a little bit weary, he's a little bit sleep deprived, and he can tell you about that a little bit later. What drink would you like to be enjoying in the Writers' Lounge this afternoon?
For me, it'll have to be a screwdriver.
Ah, nice. Haven't heard of one of those for a while, yeah.
No, it's good. Just the, feeling a little bit lacking of that vitamin C. So it's
good choice. Good choice. Yeah. All right. Our second guest is the fabulous E.J. Dawson, speculative fiction and many other things. Editor, a great assistant contributor to the writing community, and also has other exciting news happening. Hello, E.J.
Hi, Veronica. How are you?
I am well. We have had a little bit of a chat beforehand, Peep, so we're going to just go straight to who are your traditional owners?
So I'm speaking from the Jar Jar Warring County, who are the traditional landowners here.
Yep, it's fantastic. And we are, in fact, on a kind of a cusp where three different mobs, and Mount Macedon, or Nungalong, as it is known to the local mobs, is a very important place in part of the culture up here. Okay, we know where we are. EJ, what are you drinking in the Writers' Lounge?
In the Writers' Lounge, I'm drinking a Sauvignon Blanc, and if it comes with a sleeping tablet, that would be great, because I've been up since 4 a.m.
Well, you have to tell us really briefly why have you been up since 4 a.m, because I suspect that Austin might have a similar story.
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure I don't have a small child involved here. I'm part of the Futurescapes program, which is an international conference helping authors improve their work. That started very early this morning with the socials, so I got up for those, and I've been attending those most of today.
Very, very good. Austin, did you want to share why you're a little weary as well?
Yeah, I am very lucky to have become a father at the end of last year. So I've got a 9-week-old baby wandering around.
Completely disrupting your life. So congratulations. That is lovely news for both of you, really.
Exactly. Yeah. I was actually asking the Facebook group, like, what new parents can do to remain productive, and most of the answers to that question were give yourself a grace period and don't do anything at all. Be a parent,
I think that is really good advice. However, you've decided to ignore that advice and you've got a new project. So, Austin, can you tell me a little bit about Embrace the Silence?
Absolutely. So, a little bit of a landmine. I don't anyone with familiar with what's happened on Twitter over the last weekend will be aware. But let's go back in time first to mid-2000, which is when I first became kind of conscious and aware of my own neurodivergence. Mm-hmm. And obviously the COVID pandemic was happening all around us, and every week there seemed to be a new end of the world scenario, whether it was the Death Hornets. Remember those?
Oh, fun!
Yeah, fun things like that. So I was thought about what, I had an idea of putting together a anthology of neurodivergent takes on an apocalyptic scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was in the middle of publishing the Zodiac series back then, and that took a lot of time. So I kind of put it on the back burner, and then I promptly forgot about it until this recent weekend, where to a lot of people's excitement, there was an announcement made for a anthology called Growing Up Neurodivergent in Australia. And like many people, I clicked into it because I was interested. I thought this is the kind of representation we've been wanting for a while. And then saw all of these comments about how self-diagnosed people weren't able to get in, and that's such a huge part of the neurodivergent community. And then I remembered that old post-apocalyptic process, and I thought, the neurodiverse community needs some representation. I'm gonna do what I can to help that happen. And here we are, embrace the silence.
And here we are, embrace the silence. And I can't think of a better genre to embrace the silence and think about the apocalypse than speculative fiction, of course, because that's, my favourite. I'm going to admit it here. People on the podcast know that. So how did you inveigle E.J. Dawson into the mix?
Well, I had actually seen her response to one of Deadset Press's posts saying that she had been trying to put a similar project together a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, frankly, I didn't want to do it all myself. And at the same time, I think with neurodivergence and neurodiversity, one of the important things is how everyone's perceptions and understanding is different. We're at different levels with communication and things like that. And with that in mind, I thought it would be wise to have more people involved in the project, and people who had their own experiences and stories about being neurodivergent and how that's affected them, to get a fuller and more comprehensive approach to the project.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. So EJ, I suspect there wasn't much arm twisting that went on there.
None whatsoever. Austin sent this lovely, very polite and diplomatically worded DM to me, and I'm like, I'm there. What do you need me for? Like, he literally saw it come into my DMs, and I'm like, oh yes, I'm going to accept that right away. What does he want me to do? I have no idea, but I'm there.
But you're in. Yeah, you could see. You could see the need for it. All right, Austin, tell us a little bit about the details of the anthology. What do people need to produce?
Sure thing. Well, the theme, of course, is apocalyptic. A lot of times when people think of an apocalypse, they think of a science fiction scenario, but what we're wanting is apocalyptic situations in as many genres as you can think of. We want creativity. We could have, lava eruptions, volcanoes causing extinction level events, in fantasy realms. And there's lots of different perspectives that could make it more of a horror-esque thing as well. So so what we want is diversity amongst styles of writing, amongst genres, just to make the project pop. And I think that's why I'm actually separately really excited about the fact that it's a neurodivergent anthology written by neurodivergent writers, because everyone will be bringing to the story their own take and perspective and experiences of being neurodivergent. And I'm just super excited about that concept, and reading through and getting a greater understanding of neurodivergence through everyone else's stories. It's going to be super exciting.
Yes. I just think there'd be such a breadth of ideas come in. That is a beautiful, open set of criteria, I guess, and just, whatever people can do as long as they have the apocalyptic element in there.
Exactly. We should just take a sec to clarify that this is absolutely open for anybody who identifies as neurodivergent. No one needs any official documentation or to prove their neurodivergency in any way at all.
Fantastic. So you're looking for short stories between 4,000 and 6,000 words. But I even love this line that you have. This is just a guideline. You won't auto-reject stories based on word count alone.
Absolutely not. If there's a story that's like, 8,000 words long that we absolutely love, we're probably not going to reject it.
Yeah. Based on some of the brilliant stuff I know that's come from Deadset Press, your work included, then I think you know how to pick stories and you know how to support authors to make them brilliant. So that's fantastic. So only unpublished pieces, but no AI written stories. People, just be aware. We need people written stories. And this will be a paid anthology, and there'll be some more details coming on the website soon. And anybody who's got any questions, of course, you just go to deadsetpressinquiries@gmail.com and send along your bits and pieces, and Austin or EJ or somebody else in Deadset Press will get back to you. EJ, what are you most looking forward to reading about? Have you got some faves?
I do actually, and this is something that I really want to strongly emphasize to anybody thinking about submitting. What I would like to see is not stories necessarily about disaster. We always think of apocalyptic events and we think of disaster and whatnot, and there's this nuance of this does not mean that your discovery that you're neurodivergent is a disaster, and that's part of the reason how we came to the title. The title is actually a Neil Gaiman quote. Is when me and Austin were talking about this, and it's I've heard the language of apocalypse and now I shall embrace the silence, from the Sandman series. And I really hope that people find ways to write their true selves into their stories, because I know that a lot of people tend to think of neurodivergent people as flighty and drama queens and all those sorts of things, and I know that some of the most level-headed and rational people and neurodivergent people during crises, and sometimes we're not. Sometimes it is too much, we are overwhelmed, and I kind of want to make sure that this series is not just about what could be seen as the disaster of your neurodivergence. This is just apocalyptic stories that have neurodivergent people in them. They're not necessarily need to be about the same thing. It's not about that, and it is about end of worlding events, but a lot of those can have a lot of joy in them, and this is why it's not limited to an Earth disaster. It could be set on another planet. It could be pretty much anything that you can imagine. And so what I am keeping an eye out for is stories that do have an element of joy in them. Is one of the things that I would love to see, because we don't have enough neurodiverse books in the science fiction, fantasy and speculative environment. And the reason that I was so quick to jump on board and be part of this was because I tried ages ago, and some very, very lovely neurodiverse friendly agents actually responded to me saying, you will not get this past a publisher. They're not going to do it. So it's been sitting there in the back of my mind for so long, and that's why I was so quick to join in this, but also to just extend something that I wanted to say before in regards to what Austin said with the decision to ask people for proof of their neurodivergence, which I found deeply offensive. Because so much of my ability to identify publicly as being neurodivergent has come from other people coming forward. And yes, I did have my diagnosis before I came forward, but I found and encouraged so many other people to go and get their diagnosis. And I'd like to just shout out to Kate Foster, another Australian children's author who's written a lot of really, really great books. The fact that she was coming forward saying that she was autistic actually encouraged me to be more vocal. And I can't name names or things like that, but the amount of people behind the scenes who've reached out to me, who have gone on to get a diagnosis or who have come to better accept themselves because of more people being publicly open about neurodiversity and about autism, has been wonderful. And this is why this anthology is so important, and that's what I want to see. I want to see people, diagnosed or otherwise, submitting to us. I want the stories of your personal perspectives, and there's a massive goal there to make sure that we keep that perspective
and keep these voices, or not only keep, but encourage more new voices. I mean, Kate Foster is fantastic with all her beautiful children's stories. We've just had Kay Kerr on the last podcast talking about love and autism. She's a neurodivergent woman, and that was her third book, and it was just brilliant to talk with her. And Watley, of course, is also very vocal about supporting the autistic or neurodivergent writing community. So it's fantastic that Deadset Press have, I'll just keep going with my inveigled, EJ, but it sounds like it was a pretty good one, to put together Embrace the Silence, which is a neurodivergent anthology. And it opens when, Austin? When do submissions open?
I believe it's July, but I know that you've got the website.
I have indeed. I didn't want to. I was just saying I've been reading it, but yes, in fact, submissions open on July 1st, and the intent is to publish Embrace the Silence in 2024. And I know that Deadset Press just get on and do those things if they say they're going to publish it. And the Zodiac series, what is the one that I've read of yours, Austin, where the water series, it was apocalyptic. What's the name of the whole series?
That was the Drowned Earth
series. Love that. I think I read about 4 or 5 in that series. It was really good. And I have to say, not all of them were really, as you've talked about, apocalyptic. They weren't end of the world, terrible, nightmarish kind of things. Yes, all the end of the worlds were there, but I just said what I particularly liked about yours was that Melbourne was in there, and I thought, oh yeah, I know that building, I know that, and it's so lovely to see our own names and places. And with this anthology, anybody who identifies as neurodiverse has the opportunity to put a story into the anthology. How big do you think it's going to be? What's your guess? How many stories are you going to get?
Austin, we talked about this. Remember, there is a number.
All right, no spoilers.
I want all the stories, but we have a limit.
We do. Surprisingly enough, the larger a book is, the more pages it's got, the more expensive it is to go to print.
Yes, and to post and to do all of those kind of things. Yeah.
So it's a bit. It's honestly one of the more frustrating things about being a publisher in Australia, because it's just so expensive for us.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
We do what we can.
Yes, indeed we do.
And we're going to do what we can to get the best diverse neurodivergent stories for this collection, and I'm super excited about going through all of the submissions and then editing them so that they're all wonderful and brilliant in their own way.
I think it's a pretty good vision to be having. Is there anything that you would like to say to potential authors who are thinking about submitting? Got any advice for them?
Oh, there's 2 answers to that.
Okay. EJ, what's your advice for writers considering submitting?
I know that most neurodivergent authors will have that story It's going to be a little piece of them they didn't think that they could share with anyone else because it was to them. Too much neurodivergent, too much of themselves. And that's the kind of story I want to see. I want to see the story you didn't think would ever get accepted anywhere because it was too much of you. And that's what I want to see. I want to see too much of you. So if you have a story that you've already written, submit it. If you've got a story inside you've always wanted to write, you've got the time. Submissions don't start until July. That's like 3-4 months away. You've got time. Okay? And it does not have to be perfect. It just has to be your best neurodivergent self.
Excellent. Thank you. What about you, Austin? What advice for writers?
So, as always, I guess, whenever anyone is asking me about, whether they should submit or not, I always just think to that line that, there's never any point in auto-rejecting yourself. Some people, actually have that as their job to reject you.
Yeah.
And you don't want to put them out of a job.
No, give it to somebody else. Yeah, I like that. I really do.
One of the whole things behind creating Deadset Press was to provide publishing pathways for emerging writers from Australia and New Zealand, and wanting to shine light on unique and diverse voices. And this project, this Embrace the Silence neurodivergent anthology, is an opportunity that we're super excited for, to be a platform for the neurodivergent community in Australia and New Zealand, but we're also really wanting to see submissions from neurodivergent members of the LGBTIQ community and Indigenous Australians who are also neurodivergent. We just want to have a whole mess of stories from everyone and truly celebrate the depth and breadth of the neurodivergent community in Australia and New Zealand.
I think that's brilliant. Yeah, that is a great line for all of your marketing, that you want to celebrate the depth and breadth of the community. Fantastic. Well, we are coming to the end. I think the bar staff want to boot us out of the Writers' Lounge because they want to go home. So we'll finish up our drinks and say thank you very much to Austin Sheehan for dropping in, and to EJ Dawson for dropping into the Writers' Lounge and telling us all about Embrace the Silence, a neurodivergent anthology by Deadset Press. Get out there, get your stories in, and we will try and mention it again in a couple of months when it gets a little bit closer. So thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having us.
Indeed, it's been a exciting and a little bit intimidating, but it's been fun. Good to hear. All right, bye for now.
Okay, made it out of the lounge one more time. Who knows, one day we may get stuck in that proverbial, Hotel California style writer's lounge. And
I can think of worse places to be.
Yeah, same here. Perpetual ideas for novels and a million years plus to write them. There we go. But we made it out, and it's episode 78. And, thank you so much to Ben and for everybody for joining in and being a part of it. But Veronica, now it's time for maybe a tagline to, tidy up things here. So with all the talk about, those harsh conditions and the hope and the grind and, the strike it rich and the heartache of the gold mines, and especially Victoria, of course, back in the gold rush. So I'm thinking maybe hot, dusty day, that hot wind's blowing, the picks are hitting the ground. There's, there's anticipation in the air, there's frustration in the air, but maybe you and I are, back in time, sledging at the ground, just a few metres away from each other, hoping to strike that gold nugget. And maybe that's where we are, calling out to each other. What do you think?
Give it a go. Give it a go.
Don't know how this one's going to work, but we'll give it a shot.
Yeah, Darren, it's damn hot
Yeah.
today.
Oh, yeah.
You getting any colour in your pan there?
Oh, not yet. Not yet.
No. Well, I might not have picked up any gold, but I have got a gold piece of advice for you.
I'll take any sort of gold right now. What is it?
Remember to read more
Oh,
Aussie
Aussie
books.
books. That's the best advice I've heard all day. Yeah. All right. Are you going to use that pick or can I take that from you?
All yours, buddy.
All right. I'm not sure if I would have been any good as a gold miner, let alone, I don't know how I could use 2 picks with 2 arms. But anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for episode 78. And we hope to have your wonderful presence, episode 79. It's been a huge adventure this episode and many more to come. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks to everybody and bye for now.
Let's meet again. Where magic happens.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.